Chapter 99. Gustav paused in his tracks and turned around to stare at Principal Irwin. Why are you doing this? Echelon Academy is also your school. Do you wish for it to go under? Principal Irwin asked with a conflicted stare. Haha, that's the funniest question I've ever heard. Principal Irwin must be a comedian. Do you really think I care about this school? Gustav laughed lightly while asking. The school can be burned down for all I care. It shouldn't be new to everyone that he hated the school after everything they had put him through, yet Principal Irwin was asking like he wasn't aware of any of that. Please, Gustav, you can't let the reputation of the school sink, one of the teachers begged. The other teachers also had a pleading look on their faces. The school will be grateful, the vice principal added. Gustav chuckled and turned around. I don't care if you all lose your jobs. After all, you never did a thing when I was being bullied by your beloved students. He started walking away once again. Hidden quest completed. A new random quest has been issued. Gustav paused after walking several feet away after seeing the notifications. Completing a hidden quest and receiving a random quest at the same time. Gustav checked out the information under both notifications and a grin appeared on his face. Had a feeling it would be something like this. Gustav turned around and started heading back towards the principal and the teachers. Their moppy looks changed into hopeful ones after seeing Gustav approaching them. Principal Irwin remember making a deal with Miss Amy? Gustav asked. Principal Irwin nodded slightly with a knowing look. Good now, you're gonna have a separate deal with me if you truly want me to participate, Gustav said, and proceeded to sit while crossing his leg. The principal had the rest of the staff had looks of confusion upon hearing that. Not just you, but all the rest of the teacher too. All of you are involved. Gustav smiled while speaking. Just like that, 1 hour had gone by again, and it was time for the exchange of knowledge to resume. The hall was crowded once again. The participants from each school walked towards the stage again, Gustav included. After his discussion with the teachers ended earlier, he walked around the school and visited a few places in the environment. One of them was their library. He was fond of Atrahia's high school library for a few reasons. One of them was there weren't any restricted sessions in the libraries, unlike Echelon Academy. One thing he noticed during that short period of observation was their library mostly had historical information about their city, but when it came to historical information about the world as a whole, Echelon Academy had more detailed books. Cheers! 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 The crowd was still cheering for Atrahia City High School participants. They got to the stage and took their seats. Gustav also took his seat in his initial sitting position. The principal of Atrahia City High walked towards the stage once again and said a few words before giving them the go-ahead for the resumption of the event. As expected, the first school that would be asking a question again was Cheryl High. From now on, leave it to me, Gustav said with a confident expression while staring at Maltida and Draco. Both of them stared back at him with a confused expression. They were about to ask what he meant when the female student from Cheryl started voicing out her question. Cancer used to be a very dangerous disease to humans back in the old days. Explain how they came into existence and how they were cured? The female student stated and took her seat when she was done. She had a pretty confident look on her face. It was obvious that she had used that 1 hour to prepare herself. They waited for about 3 seconds before the screen above lit up with a green mark that symbolized the question wasn't above high school level difficulty. Beep. Immediately the green light appeared. A student had tapped the red light on the panel in front of them. Everyone felt it must have been the genius Holland again, since this was the fastest speed anyone used in tapping the red display button for answering questions. To everyone's surprise, the screen displayed Gustav's appearance and his name. Dash, isn't he the same guy that didn't bother trying to answer a single question during the first half? Dash, I can tell that his answer is going to be full of rubbish. The crowd of students didn't believe that someone who didn't answer a single question earlier would be able to answer any right now. Only the students of Echelon Academy actually had looks of bewilderment. Is finally going to be serious? Matilda wondered while staring at Gustav, who was now in a standing position. Gustav walked to the middle of the stage and stared at the crowd with a nonchalant expression before he started speaking. Cancer didn't need to come into existence. It was already in humans since the day of their birth. The reason why it when I noticed was because it was always asleep, practically dead until a force triggered it. Gustav paused for a while before continuing. Once it was triggered by this force, that is when it awakens in the human body and became discoverable through scientific experiments. Different kinds of things can trigger cancer. It just varies from person to person. It may be an intense workout, frequent usage of dirty outfits, unknown consumption of chemicals, and so many others. Gustav was practically like a teacher as he explained. He moved to the front of Cheryl High students and placed his left arm in his pocket before continuing his explanation. The cancer cure wasn't later needed since humans achieved partial evolution, causing their internal body structure to slightly change. This caused cancer to totally disappear from the human race in the year 2059. No cure was created in the first place since humans didn't have the capacity to pull that off. Their salvation came from the partial evolution. Gustav concluded with this. Chapter 100. The students of Cheryl High had their eyes slightly widened. How does he know about this? They thought that no one would be able to answer this question since it had to do with both history and biology. The only person that they felt wary about was Holland, and they believed that even he wouldn't be able to answer such a question related to biology dated back by that long. Beep. Another loud beeping reverberated across the hall. Dash, he got it wrong. Dash, as expected of someone who didn't answer a single question in the first half. The beeping sounded like Gustav got the question wrong, but immediately they noticed that was on the screen. Their eyes widened. Dash, perfect graded explanation? On the screen, Gustav's answer to the question was graded as perfect. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Dash, how is this possible? Dash, he explained the answer perfectly? The students were in shock except for the Echelon Academy students. The students of Cheryl High School didn't doubt the perfect graded answer since their explanation wasn't as detailed as that. They knew that if everyone failed to get the right answer and they gave the answer themselves, it wouldn't have been as explanatory as that. Gustav had taken his seat at this point. It was time for the next school to ask their question. Gustav had already grabbed everyone's attention, so they all watched with looks of interest. They wanted to know if what he pulled off earlier was just dumb luck. The next school, which was Eagle Wings High, took the stage. One of their female participants with dark gold hair stood in the middle of the stage and voiced out her question. My question will be based on the anatomy of mixed breeds, the female student said before proceeding to ask her question. Mixed breeds also have bloodlines, yet they're in form of beasts. What differences are there between a mixed breed bloodline and a mixed blood bloodline? After asking the question, the screen graded it to be okay for answering. Beep. Immediately after it was graded, finish the answer display button had been tapped again. According to the display screen up, two students' fingers could be seen on the display panel in front of them. They were Holland and Gustav. They tapped before any one of the students could. They had tapped so fast that no one knew who tapped first. Everyone stared intensely at the stage, waiting for the screen to display who touched the answer button first. Dash, Holland definitely tapped it first. Dash, haha. There's no way he tapped before Holland. Everyone believed Holland tapped before Gustav. All of a sudden, Gustav stood up and walked to the middle of the stage. The students of Atrahia City High School were surprised to see Gustav stand up. Dash, what's he doing? Dash, the person who tapped it first hasn't been displayed. Why is he walking up to the stage? Dash, what a cocky dumbass. I'm sure Holland will be displayed as the first person to. Everyone stared at the screen in surprise, which displayed that Gustav was the first to tap the answer button. They were speechless at the current development. There are several differences between the bloodline of mixed breeds and mixed bloods. Gustav started explaining as he placed his left hand in his pocket and used his right hand to demonstrate. One of them is the fact that mixed bloods mostly have bloodlines that enables them to retain their human form and also at times give abilities that don't require transformation, while mixed breeds have bloodlines that tend to relate with their forms and grants abilities that are generally different from most mixed bloods. Gustav paused for a second and walked to the front of Eagle Wings High School participants. He stared into the eyes of the female who asked the question before he continued speaking. The girl couldn't understand why she couldn't take her eyes off Gustav. Practically every girl in the hall was staring at Gustav with a gaze filled with interest. The way he walked around while giving explanations with his cool expression and good-looking face, mixed with graceful movements, made them feel a certain kind of subconscious attraction to him. Reasons for this is based on how mixed bloods have unsaturated bloodlines within their bodies and have to channel their bloodlines for increment. The mixed breeds have a saturated amount of bloodline within their bodies from the moment of their birth. Gustav kept explaining for another 5 minutes before concluding. He had made extensive research on mixed breeds since he started killing them, which was why he was able to give so much information at the moment. One of the things that bugged him when researching this was, if mixed bloods managed to increase the concentration of the bloodlines in their bodies to the point where every vessel, vein, and artery had their bloodline flowing through it, would transformation take place like the mixed breeds? Would mixed bloods transform to become beasts and be unable to go back to their initial state? The reason why this bugged him so much was, mixed breeds didn't have normal blood flowing through their body, unlike mixed bloods who had human and Slarkov's blood flowing through them simultaneously. After Gustav finished his explanation, the entire hall became silent again. The screen displayed a perfect explanation, and another 5 marks were added to Echelon Academy. The shocked looks on the faces of other students and the principals of other schools made Principal Irwin's face light up. If he was this knowledgeable in the first place, why didn't he say a thing in the first half? Everyone had similar thoughts. They were in awe due to his performance. Like Holland wasn't enough, now we have to compete with another monster. The other participants stared at Gustav with looks of intimidation. Holland kept staring at Gustav, but Gustav didn't even spare him a glance, almost like he was saying, "You're not on my level." The event continued after that, and the next school came up to present their question. Beep. Just like before, Gustav had tapped the button before anyone else again and walked to the stage to answer. The crowd was once again left with shocked faces as Gustav gave another perfect explanation while answering this question. Echelon Academy was the fourth in line to ask a question, which meant it was their turn now. Draco wanted to stand up, but Gustav held on to his left shoulder from the side. "I said leave it to me," Gustav muttered and proceeded to stand up before Draco could reply. "I will be asking a question based on historical records of the Slarkov's descent," Gustav said while walking to the middle of the stage. Chapter 101. The participants stared at him with a nervous expression. This was a very vast topic, and information about it was mostly kept under the wraps. They had no idea if the question would be based on general knowledge or not, but everything still depended on the grading of the difficulty of the question. What tool was presented to Earth by the Slarkovs to show that they were a peaceful race? Gustav asked and walked back to his seat. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The hall became noisy again after Gustav asked his question. This was truly something that wasn't known to the general public, because history books relating to the Slarkov's descent were extremely scarce. It was almost like information about that was being covered up. The screen started calculating the difficulty. In a few seconds, it displayed the difficulty, which happened to be a high school level difficulty. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The hall became noisier. At first, the students believed it would be above high school level, but now that it had been displayed that it wasn't, the participants would have no choice but to answer. Small whispers could be heard on the stage as teammates discussed among themselves how they would answer. Even after 2 minutes had passed, not a single participant stood up to answer. "It's just as I thought. He is well versed in science than other topics." Gustav stared at Atrahia City's high school participants with a look of contemplation. He had studied the 3 students representing them earlier: Holland, Ezekiel, and Vivi. The 3 were versed in different aspects that complemented one another, but Holland was the only person Gustav felt was more knowledgeable in the aspect he was versed in, which was science. If he were to come up with a scientific question, he was sure that Holland had an 80% chance of answering. Since Holland was the only person, he was wary if he decided to bring up a subject that wasn't related to science. The girl in their group, Vivi, was the only one who was really knowledgeable when it came to history, but Gustav doubted that even she knew the answer to this. Beep. Finally, a school tapped on the button. A female student from Black Rock School came forward to answer. "The item wasn't mentioned in the historical records. How are we supposed to know it?" she said with a squeezed-up face. Everyone thought she came up to answer. No one expected that she actually came up to complain about the question. "The tool was very well mentioned," Gustav replied to her bluntly. "Do you even know the answer to the question you asked?" She pointed at Gustav with a dark look. "We will find out when you all fail to answer," Gustav replied with an unbothered look. "Aurora Gantz, that stage isn't for arguments. It's for questions and answers." If you know nothing about the answer to the question, please take your seat, or you will get disqualified. A loud voice came from the other stage. It was the vice principal of Atrahia City High School. He had to give her a warning since she was using the stage for the wrong purpose. Aurora walked back to her seat with a look of embarrassment. Now everyone went back to waiting for another student to walk up the stage and answer. 10 seconds went by in silence. Another 30 seconds went by again, and yet no one stood up to answer. After a minute went by, the female student from Atrahia City High School tapped the answer display panel and stood up. She walked to the middle of the stage and started speaking. According to the history of the Slarkov's descent, the humans thought they were hostile and acted unreasonably by sending out artilleries in an act to protect themselves from doom. The historical records also connote that an item was given to the Earth as a gift to show that they were a peaceful race, but this item wasn't mentioned. She paused for a bit before continuing. From our observation of Earth's history down the line, the Earth seemed to be protected by something relating to a prediction machine. The reason for this thought is because of the time a meteor shower was said to rain on the Earth. The places that were affected had been evacuated of human life beforehand, she said with a look of certainty. I believe the item is a technological doom prediction device. She concluded with this. Chatter, chatter, chatter. Voices conversing could be heard from the crowd. They talked about the possibility of Vivi's answer being correct while waiting for the result. Even the audience themselves were not very knowledgeable when it came to history, so they couldn't tell if the answer was correct. Beep. The screen finally displayed the status of her answer after a few seconds. To everyone's surprise, she was wrong. Here I was thinking she could actually answer correctly with the way she started. What a disappointment, Gustav said internally. The chatters from the crowd increased again. Since even Vivi got it wrong, I doubt any of the students can get it correctly. I doubt that this Gustav who asked the question can answer it. The crowd, especially Atrahia City High School students, had already seen Vivi as a goddess of history due to the way she had been answering questions related to them previously. Now that she failed to answer, they believed that no one else could. The participants that had similar answers to Vivi's answer remained in position with a dumbfounded look. They couldn't think of anything else that would be the right answer to this question. Beep. Another beep resounded in the hall. This signified that the timer for answering the question had finished counting down. Now the person who posed the question would have to answer it since the other participants failed to do so. Gustav, knowing he was up, walked to the stage. I asked that what tool was presented to humanity by the Slarkovs. It's a very simple question. Gustav started speaking. In the past, when the Slarkovs descended, there was chaos, but the Slarkovs gave two things to humanity to prove that they weren't a hostile race. Instead, they were peaceful. Gustav paused for a bit before continuing. One is well known to everyone while the other is hidden. Intelligence, Gustav stated with a profound look. Chatter, chatter, chatter. How could intelligence be the answer? Is he messing around right now, or he doesn't know the answer? Is he referring to intelligence as the tool received? The crowd refused to believe that Gustav was right. Gustav didn't mind their words and kept speaking. Chapter 102. In the historical records of the Slarkovs' descent, it was well noted that the Slarkovs had given a tool to the humans as a gift to show that they weren't hostile, but this tool wasn't revealed. But was that the only tool that the Slarkovs presented the humans with? Of course not. The humans also demanded that the Slarkovs share their knowledge and intelligence on technology with them. If they had decided not to share, the Slarkovs would have been seen as a hostile race, so the Slarkovs also shared their intelligence with the humans. This means two tools were given. One is unknown and the other is intelligence. Gustav stopped moving and stood in the middle of the stage. Since I asked what tool was given and there happened to be two tools, you only needed to mention a single one, Gustav added with a slight smile. Beep. The screen lit up, displaying that Gustav had answered the question correctly. Silence. The crowd was once again rendered speechless. Gustav had practically played with their minds. It was public knowledge that technological advancement today was due to the Slarkovs, but when a question like this was asked, the first thing that came to mind would be the item that was presented as a gift to the humans. No one would think of the intelligence that was shared. Even the principals were surprised when they heard this. They hadn't expected such a reply since they knew the information about that item was very well guarded. They thought Gustav was also going to miss the question, including Principal Irwin. This kid. I thought he asked this question so everyone could fail and the 5 points would be lost. Who knew he would pull such a mind twist on everyone? Principal Irwin had a look of surprise. His thought was similar to the rest of the principals. They had not expected Gustav to have an idea about that item. Even if he knew about it, he wouldn't be able to mention it since it was a crime to reveal the item in public. It was a very well-guarded secret among the higher-ups. Gustav would be taken into custody if he knew about it and decided to reveal it here. Gustav walked back to his seat after causing the crowd feel awed. Angie cheered for Gustav from her seat area. From the start of the event, she had been the only one cheering for him. Her classmates would stare at her with a weird look, wondering which side she rooting for, and why she would even be cheering for someone who didn't answer a single question the whole time, but she wasn't concerned about their stares. Only her close friends in school had heard her speak about Gustav, but they weren't impressed when he didn't answer a single question in the first half. Now they were starting to understand why Angie was so infatuated with him. Gustav walked back to his seat amidst the awe-stricken faces of the crowd. We were fooled. The participants could only blame themselves for not deciphering the question properly. The event commenced, and a participant from the next school came on the stage. When the question was asked again and graded on the screen, the beeping sound was heard immediately. This time, a lot of the students tapped on the answer button at the same time. At least that was how the audience saw it, but the screen showed Gustav as the first person to tap the answer display button once again. Gustav answered the question correctly, adding extra 5 points to Echelon Academy. As the event continued, the participants and audience faces turned from shock to awe and from awe to disbelief. Gustav would always be displayed as the first to tap the answer button. The participants were starting to think that it was rigged, since they also tapped the button immediately after the question had been graded. Atrahia City High School participants would purposely stretch out their finger towards the panel before the question was graded, so they could quickly tap on it, but even with that, Gustav would still be displayed as the first to tap. Due to this, Gustav kept bagging points for Echelon Academy, causing them to rise on the rankings. Gustav kept answering one question after the other correctly. After answering the 17th question, Vivi couldn't take it anymore. She stood up with an incensed look and accused Echelon Academy of cheating. How could he keep being the first to tap when we all tapped it at the same time? She pointed at Gustav as she spoke. This disturbed the event, and the principal of Atrahia City High School had to address this on the podium. Vivi, take your seat and stop throwing baseless accusations around, Atrahia City High School principal said. What? Principal Dirk? It's obvious that he's cheating, Vivi shouted out while staring at Gustav with a look of anguish. Gustav just stared back at her with a calm look. Please take your seat so you do not embarrass yourself any further, Principal Dirk replied, dumbfounded them. They had not expected this to be his response. Principal Dirk, what is the meaning of this? Your student is trying to tarnish the reputation of mine, Principal Irwin voiced out from behind. Your student is cheating, Vivi shouted out. Vivi, keep quiet. Principal Dirk had to scold her openly before she turned silent. He turned around and apologized to Principal Irwin before asking the screen to replay the previous question and answer sessions. On the large screen, footages were displayed of when the previous questions were graded. It displayed the footage in slow motion. All the participants stretching their fingers forward to tap into the answer button, but before any one of them could touch it, Gustav's finger would have already made contact. His finger was like a blur pushing forward with a speed that was faster than the other participants. The students didn't notice this earlier since all the participants were very quick in tapping the button. They had been thinking. All the participants made contact at the same time, but now they realized just how wrong they were. Vivi felt a wave of embarrassment envelope her. Vivi apologized to Gustav now, Principal Dirk commanded. Vivi shyly walked towards Echelon Academy, sitting position, and bowed slightly in front of Gustav. I'm sorry for accusing you wrongly, she apologized. She felt like she had received another slap on her face after failing to answer his question the first time. Gustav replied by nodding at her. After that, she returned to her seat and the event continued. The entire hall was still in awe since they've been proven wrong time and time again by Gustav's feats. This kid, how is he able to move so fast? Even Principal Irwin was in awe. Chapter 103. Every other participant on the stage was all supposed to have better bloodlines than Gustav, so it came off as suspicious to the principal when he noticed that Gustav was surpassing them in speed. Maybe it's because of her. Principal Irwin remembered that Gustav had been receiving training from Miss Amy. It wasn't a secret anymore that Gustav was receiving training from Miss Amy, but no one knew that Gustav's increase in strength didn't totally come from her. Principal Irwin felt that Gustav's training with Miss Amy was the only possible explanation, even though it was supposed to be impossible to train an F-grade mixed blood to be more powerful than those that had higher grades. This was the explanation he came up with, but that didn't mean his suspicion towards Gustav had reduced. Instead, he knew that there was nothing he could do about it. Maybe she only trained him in the aspect of speed. Principal Irwin came to this conclusion since it was very possible for a person to be trained in only speed and end up becoming faster than those that were supposed to be stronger. Principal Irwin had a little monster like this and decided to keep him under the wraps during the first half. Principal Dirk said from the side. Haha, Principal Dirk, that wasn't my intention. He was only meant to observe his opponents for the first half and know how to tackle them successfully during the second half. Principal Irwin didn't miss the opportunity to make Echelon Academy look good. Blowing Gustav's trumpet was the best way to achieve that right now. Ah, so he's like a secret weapon, and Principal Irwin decided not to unleash him till the next half? Black Rock Principal asked from the side with a look of astonishment. Haha, you can say that. Principal Irwin laughed lightly while replying. A secret weapon that cost me a lot. Principal Irwin was both heartbroken and joyful at the same time. But at least he is worth it. The exchange event commenced and schools continued to ask their questions only to have them answered by Gustav. Holland stared at Gustav from his position and shook his head with a wry smile. I've lost to him. An hour later, the exchange of knowledge event had come to an end and the results were currently being showcased on the screen above. 1. Echelon Academy, 190 points. 2. Atrahia City High School, 90 points. 3. Sherrill High School, 35 points. 4. Briar Bullet High Schools, 30 points. 5. Black Rock Schools, 30.6. Eagle Wing School, 25.7. Ascension Academy, 20.8. Salvation Academy, 10.9. Mount Eve High, 5.10. Caldruis Eva High, 5.11. Reflection Academy, 5.12. Rose High School, 5 points. Echelon Academy took first place in the Exchange of Knowledge event. The difference in points between the first and the second place was gargantuan. It was truly an outstanding win for Echelon Academy. The entire hall erupted in cheers after the event came to an end. The cheers were mostly from Echelon Academy students. Even though a lot of them still regarded Gustav as a lower life form due to his bloodline, they had to admit that this wouldn't have been possible without him. The Exchange of Knowledge event came to an end this way, and the students were taken back to the hotel to rest for tomorrow's duel. It had already been announced that there were going to be duels between schools tomorrow in Atrahia City High School's training grounds. All schools would be participating with 7 students each. Some hours later, Gustav was heading to his room after he had a conversation with the principal and some of the teachers. Hee, that's more than 1 million now. I just need to find a way to keep multiplying that, Gustav said internally as he walked across the hallway. He had finished receiving compensations from the principal and the teachers. It was truly a bountiful harvest for him. As Gustav transversed through the hallway, he noticed someone headed towards him from the opposite direction. What are you doing here? Gustav asked with a menacing look after figuring out who the person was. It was none other than the white-haired beauty Maltida. She paused her movement when she arrived in front of Gustav. Gustav walked to the front of his room door and stood before it while staring at her. What do you want? Gustav asked again. Well, first, good job today. We would have lost if you didn't step up. She praised Gustav with a smile. What exactly do you want, Maltida? Stop beating around the bush. I know you're not the type to care about others, Gustav said with an intense glare. Ouch, that hurt, Maltida muttered with a wry smile. But maybe you're right, Maltida replied with a serious gaze. When you live the kind of life that I do, you tend to ignore it. Before Maltida could complete her sentence, Gustav interrupted her. I don't care. Keep whatever you're going to say to yourself. Gustav's tone and manner of speaking at this point sounded very uncaring. It was laced with such coldness that Maltida felt chills, especially with the way he stared at her. Just tell me what you want. Why are you on my case? Gustav asked while moving closer to her. I want us to make a deal, Maltida said while moving closer to Gustav. A deal? Sounds pretty interesting, but what makes you think I'd make a deal with you without knowing your motive first? Gustav asked. I want us to work together after getting into the MBO training camp. I want us to be accomplices. Maltida finally spilled the beans. Work together? What makes you think I'll pass the test and get into the camp? Even if I did, why would you want to work with trash? Gustav asked in successions. I hope you stop seeing me as a fool because you and I both know that you're not trash anymore. Maltida said with a look of certainty. I don't know what happened to you recently, but I can tell that you're not the same as you used to be. She added. I don't know what you're getting at. Why would you need an accomplice within the camp? Gustav asked with a suspicious gaze. You can't understand the information big families receive. If we become comrades, I will explain everything to you. It's gonna be a win-win in the end, Maltida answered. Just where are you getting such ideas about me being worthy of becoming your accomplice? Gustav questioned with a suspicious gaze. Chapter 104. You survived the attack of the spacecraft in Site number 47. You left my side without me noticing during our tour in the market, and your personality took a complete 180 degrees turn. Gustav, it's all right if you want to hide the fact you're now different, but please stop treating me like a fool. I've already told you what I want. If we work together, we could really gain a lot of advantages from being each other's companion. Consider my request. Maltida's explanation left Gustav with a contemplative expression. Now that she had revealed her intentions, Gustav's suspicion towards her had reduced. If she didn't come clean, Gustav would never give her any chances. So you want us to make use of one another? You scratch my back and I scratch yours. Mutual gains. Is that it? Gustav said. Matilda nodded slightly. That's why I want to make a deal with you, so you can see just how sincere I am about this, Maltida explained. Let's go talk somewhere. Gustav turned around and headed for a secluded place within the hotel with Maltida. An hour later, Gustav was in his room seating on his bed. Only two of his roommates were in at this moment, so the room was quiet. A lot has happened today, but I still got a lot of rewards from them. Gustav reminisced about today's event. The other time, when he decided not to represent Echelon Academy, he unknowingly completed a hidden quest. Hidden quest completed. Disagree to the request of your principal. Rewards, plus 10,000 EXP. Plus 5 extra attributes points. At first, when Gustav saw it, he nearly laughed out loud, wondering why the system would give him such a quest. But just as he was leaving the gathering of the principal and the other teachers, he received another quest. New quest has been issued. Showcase your knowledge in the school event. Gustav sighed internally when he saw this quest. Isn't the system contradicting itself now? This was the thought that came to Gustav's mind when he first saw the quest. After the exchange of knowledge, he got another system notification that the quest had been completed. Gustav had been wanting to check out the rewards since, but he didn't get the chance until now. Quest completed. Showcase your knowledge in the school event. Rewards. Plus 10,000 EXP. Plus 1 all stats. All skills and abilities level up. Genetic transformation bloodline level up. He nodded in satisfaction after seeing this and called for the system interface to open up. Host attributes. Skills and abilities. Bloodlines. Quests. Shop. He immediately opened host attributes after the interface appeared in his line of sight. Host attributes. Name. Gustav level. 8 class. EXP. 102 500/150 000 HP. 1250/1250 energy. 9892800/1000 attributes. Strength. 41 perception. 41 mental fortitude. 41 agility. 41 speed. 58 bravery. 41 intelligence. 41 charm. 41 defense. 41 attributes points. 40. Gustav noted the increase in his stats and EXP. He decided to add some points to the attributes except for speed. Add 2 points to strength. Plus 2 points has been added to strength. Add 2 points to perception. Plus 2 points has been added to perception. Add 2 points to mental fortitude. Plus 2 points has been added to mental fortitude. Add 2 points to agility. Plus 2 points has been added to agility. Add 2 points to bravery. Plus 2 points has been added to bravery. Add 2 points to intelligence. Plus 2 points has been added to intelligence. Add 2 points to charm. Plus 2 points has been added to charm. Add 2 points to defense. Plus 2 points has been added to defense. Gustav was still getting his daily tasks done even inside the hotel. There were workout facilities within the hotel which made it easy for him to complete his daily task. After Gustav finished distributing the points, he closed host attributes and opened bloodlines. He wanted to check on his bloodline upgrade. Bloodlines, genetic transformation, bloodline A grade. See abilities tied to bloodline: frowny face, shapeshifting, joint movement, size manipulation, beast transformation, bloodline A grade. D abilities tied to bloodline: frowny face, partial mutated bull transformation, bloodwolf transformation, Savernia serpent transformation, atomic manipulation, bloodline A grade. D abilities tied to bloodline: frowny face, disintegration of atomic structures, gravitational energy container grade. B abilities tied to bloodline A, energy installment, A energy, discharge, gravitational imbalance, gravitational field charge. Gustav scrutinized the bloodline panel with a smile. 1B grade bloodline, 1C grade bloodline, and 2D grade bloodline. Gustav felt satisfied with his rate of improvement. Even though he hadn't stolen as many bloodlines as he would have wanted to, he was still okay with this amount, and he knew laying low now would be the best line of action, so he had decided to put off trying to steal bloodlines from his classmates for now. He was also satisfied with the bloodline he got from combining those two bloodlines, even though he wasn't able to control it fully. The power was truly as dangerous as the system told him. After using energy installment for the first time 2 weeks ago, he ended up absorbing the electrical energy of 7 blocks around him. The streets were out of electricity for the next 2 days due to that. When he was experimenting with it, he noticed that the energy wasn't absorbed into his body. Instead, it was absorbed into a gravitational force that surrounded him. The gravity would collapse the space around him and store the energy there. It would be up to him to decide how and what he wanted to use it for. Gustav continued the experiment in the sparse forest region behind the neighborhood. He decided to try out one of the abilities, and he chose energy discharge. When he activated it, a system notification popped up in his line of sight. How much energy does host wish to discharge? But before he could reply, another notification popped up. All energy accumulated into gravity field will now be discharged. Boom. A vast wave of reddish energy laced with electric snakes blasted out of Gustav's body. Bang, 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 bang. Trees within the vicinity were blasted apart as the energy wave incinerated a radius of 300 feet around him. Even the ground was scorched. Gustav couldn't imagine what would have happened if people were moving around here. From then he had decided that he would only use the ability of this bloodline in cases of emergencies. Chapter 105. Although Gustav had said he wasn't going to make use of the bloodline except in cases of emergencies, there were still times that the bloodline would activate by itself. An example was when he almost absorbed the border during their travels. He suspected earlier that a part of the energy would be absorbed into his body if the gravitational field was filled up, but the system had shown that it would absorb the rest of the energy if the gravitational field was filled up. Gustav would go to the forest area every day to try and train his control of this bloodline, but even with that he still couldn't grasp control of it properly. He had calculated that the amount of force generated when he made use of discharge after absorbing 2 blocks of light was equivalent to a small nuclear electromagnetic force with wild electric currents within. It packed a lot of compounded destructive force, and he could tell that a Zulu-ranked mixed blood would be instantly blasted apart if he decided to unleash it before them. Right now his gravitational field was filled up again. The energy always surrounded him and couldn't be sensed by anyone else besides him. In other words, Gustav was like a walking bomb right now. I just need to keep things under the wraps. For now, I've been attracting a lot of attention to myself recently, Gustav said internally. But after recalling every event that happened to date, he realized that there were a lot of things that he couldn't have done low-key. Although he could have carried out some of his actions better, He wouldn't have been able to pull some things off if he wasn't under the spotlight. Now that he had a C-grade bloodline, he had fulfilled all the requirements for joining the MBO. The only issue was coming up with a good explanation as to why he was C-grade instead of being below F-grade. Gustav started coming with other plans and drafts in his mind for possible future occurrences. It was already 7 p.m. at this time. Gustav remembered that he was supposed to meet Angie on the 238th floor to play some games. He stood up and walked out of the room. It took him about 5 minutes before he arrived on the floor where a lot of students visited to play arcade games. On entering, what greeted Gustav's sight were glittering lights and a crowd of people moving to and fro. The place was as large as an entire outdoor park. Different kinds of gadgets could be seen at different spots. There were spots for playing shooting games, parkour games, virtual reality, casino bets, etc. This floor was always busy because of this. Gustav, a feminine voice called out to him from ahead. It was a girl in a white and green gown with an athletic figure. She had a beautiful and warm face, with silver and pink shoulder-length hair. 2 small horns protruded from her forehead and light makeup was applied on her face, making her look particularly dazzling. "You came," Angie said as she arrived before Gustav. "Yes, why wouldn't I?" Gustav asked with a confused look while checking her out. "Why is she all dressed up?" Gustav wondered. He was astonished by the way Angie looked so gorgeous with her get-up. He was only wearing some plain trousers and a blue jacket, so he didn't stick out in any way among the crowd of people unlike her. Hi, I thought you would ditch me," Angie said with a smile on her tender face. "Why would I ditch you, Angie?" Gustav asked with a look of confusion as they walked together. "Well, you always avoid me since I'm such a bother, and you never take that look off your face," Angie said with a look of embarrassment. "What look?" Gustav with a confused expression. "Ah, don't mind me. What games are we playing tonight?" She quickly changed the topic. Gustav stared at her from the side with a suspicious look before replying. "Let's go to the spacecraft simulator first." "Ah, I knew you were going to pick that one," Angie said with a smile. "My friends are waiting for us there," she added. "Friends?" Gustav said with a surprised look. "Yes, they wanted to meet you," Angie replied with a gleeful expression. Gustav still felt uncomfortable when the word, friend, was mentioned, but since it was Angie, he didn't think much of it. They kept walking until they arrived somewhere around the middle of the floor. Around here, there were different screens placed above that showed spacecrafts battling in space. There were several battle rings where people with a helmet over their heads sat onto a chair. They weren't moving, but their brains were working at the moment. This part of the arcade was where VR games were played. Ariana, Angie called out to 2 girls who were currently occupying one circle. Angie, both girls called out at the same time and walked to meet up with Angie ahead. Ariana was brunette with cherry-red lips, while Elle has green short hair and matured-looking face. Both of them were good-looking. "Is Lim still at it with that guy?" Angie asked when she arrived in front of them. "Yes, he's proving a bit difficult to defeat." The girls turn around to look at the circle behind and the screen above. The 2 other people within the circle currently seated on a pilot-like chair with helmets on their heads. One was a female while the other was a male. They were currently inside the game going against each other with their spacecraft. On the screen above, 2 large war spacecrafts wheezed across space, shooting laser beams at one another intensely. It was hard for one to hit the other due to the way they moved fluidly. One was pinkish and red while the other was full black. The former was being piloted by their friend while the latter was being piloted by the guy. Chapter 106. It was obvious that they were both skilled. The 2 girls noticed the handsome blonde-hair male behind Angie. "Angie, is that?" Elle voiced out with an astonished look. "Gustav!" Ariana shouted out with excitement and walked towards him. She arrived before Gustav and grabbed his right hand with both her hands. She held them up with an excited expression as she spoke. "Gustav, I'm a fan." Gustav was surprised with the way she just grabbed him. Another thing was his hand was currently resting on her perky boobs. Gustav didn't know if this was done on purpose or subconsciously. "Your knowledge on almost everything is second to none among our peers, and am still in disbelief even now. I'm also shocked that you're dating our best friend. Let's all be friends, please," she begged with a smile. Gustav was still short of words, so he didn't hear the part where Ariana mentioned dating their best friend. Pa. Oi, what are you saying? You'll scare him away. Elle slapped Ariana's head from behind, causing her to drop Gustav's hand. The feeling of softness and squishiness left his palm after it disengaged from her chest. Gustav, just ignore her. We're glad you're here, Elle said with a smile. Hey, come on, why did I have to receive a slap? Ariana said with a glare and pout. Because you're creeping him out, Elle glared back at Ariana. Angie's face was already turning red from embarrassment behind them as she stared at Gustav's face occasionally, didn't. Her mind wandered to another realm as the redness on her face intensified. It was almost like smoke was going to start erupting from her head soon. What a fun bunch. They don't seem bad, Gustav said internally while scrutinizing bickering girls. He doesn't look creeped out to me, Ariana said in her defense. Well? Elle was about to answer when she was interrupted by Gustav's statement. It's ending, Gustav said while staring at the screen. Ending? Both girls voiced out as they followed Gustav's line of sight. They stared at the screen also and noticed that the battle was still going on. She has won, Gustav said with a certain look. The girls stared at the screen with a look of confusion. They couldn't see any signs that their friend was winning, but in the next few seconds, their eyes widened. Two wormholes suddenly appeared out of nowhere while the pinkish spacecraft was being chased by the black. Due to the fact that the wormhole was still gathering power when it just appeared, its pull wasn't powerful enough to hold the pinkish spacecraft in place. This allowed the pinkish spacecraft to speed out of its AoE, but the same couldn't be said for the black spacecraft behind. The black spacecraft was being pulled left and right by the gravitational force of both wormholes, preventing it from moving for a while. The pinkish spacecraft suddenly did a 180 degrees turn and shot out a large pillar-like laser beam towards the black spacecraft. Troyan. The laser beam pierced through the spacecraft. Boom. The spacecraft exploded into smithereens. Player Lim wins. Haha, Lim won. Ariana voiced out gleefully. Angie was brought out of her imagination after hearing that. Damn it, how could I lose? Let's go again. The guy who had just lost pulled off his helmet and voiced out. Another beautiful face was unveiled when the other girl removed the helmet on her head. It was a slightly tanned red-haired beauty. Her body shape was already looking attractive before she removed the helmet. Now that she did, it further increased her attractiveness. Once a loser, always a loser. You've lost the chance to have me. Get lost. The girl said with a fierce glare. But I... The boy wanted to retort, but her fierce gaze made him flinch back in fear. She kept staring at him in that manner till he turned around and left. Wow, Lim is at it again, Ariana said with a burst of light laughter. Lim turned around to stare at Ariana, Elle, and Angie. He was bound to lose, and there's no way I'd go out with a loser anyway, Lim said. Oh, is that? She noticed Gustav behind. The girls noticed that she was staring at Gustav and smiled. Yes, he's Gustav, Ariana said with a delighted look. Lim stood up from her seat and walked towards them. Lim reacted with a look of astonishment and turned to stare at Angie. He's cute. Can I have him? Lim said with a smirk. Even Gustav was shocked by the sudden statement. Is this how girls act? He wasn't used to speaking with girls, so he had no idea how he was supposed to respond. Angie shrieked and moved towards the side to stand in between Lim and Gustav. Haha, I'm just kidding, Lim said and stood up. There will probably be another challenger soon, Lim added. Ha, it's all your fault after all. Why would you declare such a thing in the first place? Elle said while sighing. Lim issued a challenge recently. Anyone that was able to defeat her in this game would be given the chance to date her. Since then, boys from every school had been coming to challenge her. I declared such because no one can defeat me, Lim said with boldness. Since she issued the challenge, not a single person had been able to win her. The three girls sighed when they heard that. Lim was very prideful after all. Hey Gustav, I heard that you're good at playing this, Lim said while walking towards Gustav. I'm just a beginner, Gustav replied with a dismissive look. Oh, a beginner. Angie said you beat quite a lot of students here yesterday. How about we have a go? She proposed while staring into Gustav's eyes. I'm still a beginner compared to you, so you'll only waste time playing with me, "Am assured to lose," Gustav replied to her casually. "You won't lose anything from losing, but if you defeat me you'll get the chance to date me," she said while winking. "Hey, Lim, behave, that's Angie's Cruz." Ariana didn't get the chance to complete her words before Elle covered her mouth. "All right, let's play. I might need some tips from a pro player after all," Gustav said with a smile. Angie had a worried look on her face after hearing that. "Don't worry, he'll lose," Lim said while staring at Angie. Angie pouted her lips in displeasure. "Gustav better lose," she said internally. Gustav only smiled and walked towards the chair. He grabbed the helmet and took his seat. "Shall we?" Gustav said like a gentleman. "Yes, we shall. Haha. Prepare to lose, but don't worry, you'll take it easy on you." Lim sounded like a sweet villainess with her statement. "All right, let's play." Gustav placed the helmet on his head at the same time with Lim. 3 minutes later. "Player Gustav wins." These words were displayed on the screen, along with blown-up parts of a pinkish spacecraft floating away in space. The three girls watching from behind had their mouths wide open. How did Lim lose that easily? Even Angie was surprised. Chapter 107. Lim's expression of disbelief became visible after she removed her helmet. Gustav pulled off his helmet too. A small grin could be seen on his face. "Thanks for going easy on me," Gustav said with a look of appreciation. "Cut the bullshit. How did you do that?" Lim asked. "So vulgar for a young lady," Gustav said with a smile. The girls behind chuckled upon hearing that and seeing Lim swell up due to frustration. "It's really very simple. Just study the patterns of the superclusters and Pleiades properly so you know which parts of space are weaker and more likely to collapse due to intensely powerful blasts," Gustav explained with a profound look. 3 minutes ago when he started playing with her, Gustav didn't try to battle her head-on. When it came to direct battle, he knew he'd probably not be her match since he was still inexperienced when playing the game unlike her, so he decided to lead her around. She knew he was leading her around, but she had no idea why or what reason he would have for shooting at different places in the open space, like he didn't know how to aim properly since none of the shots he fired made contact or came close to making contact with her spacecraft. Also, he used the most powerful shots the spacecraft could offer, which would consume power and fuel crazily. Although she was experienced in playing the game, she didn't really have knowledge about space, but Gustav was very knowledgeable when it came to a lot of things, and space was included. The cannons of spacecraft in this age had been built to be very powerful that it was possible for consecutive blasts to destroy an entire star. There was another thing that those consecutive blasts could do, which was to cause space to collapse against itself and create a black hole. Gustav studied the patterns of space and knew exactly where to fire to easily cause space around a particular part to collapse. Spacecrafts of this age could escape wormholes and black holes, but when they appeared in multiples, they wouldn't be able to escape in one piece, or they might not be able to escape at all. Generally, black holes were more powerful than wormholes, so when 50 black holes appeared around Lim's spacecraft, she didn't know how to proceed. Her spacecraft was caught in between the black holes while Gustav had navigated his spacecraft away from the AOC. Her spacecraft was torn apart by the multiple black holes and Gustav won. "Your knowledge led to my defeat." Lim couldn't really understand everything about the way Gustav won, but she knew it was attributed to his intelligence and knowledge. Some readers will wonder how that has got to do with intelligence, so I'll explain in the author's note below. I put this here because a lot of you don't read the author's note below and end up missing explanations sometimes. "Let's go again," Lim stated with a decisive look. "Are you gonna offer something else if you lose again?" Gustav asked with a smirk. Lim's eyes widened in realization. "I lost to you just now, which means he gets to date me," she said voiced out. Everyone's eyes widened upon hearing this. "DT," Angie voiced out with a look of indignation. "Lim, you." Angie pointed at Lim with a look of speechlessness. "Haha, calm down, I don't have plans of dating you, or anyone else for that matter. They'll just ask for something else instead," Gustav said to clear up the weird atmosphere. Upon hearing that, the tension in the atmosphere reduced just as Gustav expected, but Lim couldn't understand why she suddenly felt down when Gustav said he didn't have plans of dating her. Such blatant rejection. When did I lose my charm? She sighed internally. If anyone who knew Lim was to find out that Gustav had rejected her, they would think he was kicked in the head by a donkey. Lim was well known to be the #1 beauty who came from a family that owned a fashion company. She only attended Black Rock School because it was owned by her great-maternal grandmother. Every guy wanted to date her, and Gustav just threw that chance away. "Let's go again. If I win, your previous win will be cancelled," Lim said with a look of unwillingness. "What happens if you lose?" Gustav asked. "Well, if I lose, you can make a request and I will grant it," Lim stated with a fierce look. However, she still added, "But I won't lose." "All right, then let's have another round," Gustav chuckled softly after replying. 3 minutes later, player Gustav wins. This was displayed on the large screen above. Lim grounded her teeth in frustration after removing the helmet. "Let's go again," she voiced out. 2 minutes later, player Gustav wins. Once again, Gustav won and Lim demanded a rematch. This went on till after they had rematched more than 10 times. The girls noticed that whenever Gustav defeated her, he would spend a shorter time to defeat her the next time they had a rematch. The next time would always be shorter than the last, and he defeated her within 30 seconds in their last rematch. They had lost count of how many times they opened their mouths in disbelief. Lim, who couldn't be defeated by any of their peers, was getting trashed by Gustav quite easily. After losing once again, Lim finally lost any hope of defeating Gustav. She noticed that with every round, Gustav would get better and better. It was as if he was using their battles to improve even further. Her thought was correct. Gustav was using their battles to improve himself on aerial warfare. Although the kind of spacecrafts they were using to battle in the VR was a smaller version of an original spacecraft and only needed a single person to pilot it, there were still a lot of similarities between both. Learning how to pilot a spacecraft within this VR was very possible, most especially because of the fact that it fully immersed the players into the game like they were in an original spacecraft. "Lim, do you want to go again?" Gustav asked after removing his helmet. Lim stared at him for a few seconds before turning to look in another direction. "What's the point? You've broken my confidence." She sighed with a look of defeat. Chapter 108. "I don't mind being yours now since you've totally dominated me," Lim said with her face becoming red. "Lim, what are you saying?" Angie said while staring at Lim. "He defeated me severally, Angie. He has gained the right to not only go on a date with me, but have me," Lim said with her face turning red. "How can you just decide to let him have you like that?" Angie pointed at Lim with a wolf-like fierce face as she spoke. "It was a challenge and he won. He deserves his reward," Lim said replied. "No, he definitely doesn't want a reward," Angie said with an unwilling look. Ariana and Elle watched from the side with a look of confusion, wondering how things suddenly became heated. "I do want a reward," Gustav finally spoke. Every one of them turned to stare at Gustav after hearing that. "A reward? Then you want her?" Angie asked with a crestfallen look. "Don't misunderstand. I mentioned earlier that I would ask for something else," Gustav said. Angie sighed in relief after hearing that, but she still wanted to know what Gustav wanted. "You lost to me 15 times, so you will have to grant 15 of my requests," Gustav announced. 15? The girls were surprised, but what they heard next surprised them even more. "I accept," Lim stated. She accepted just like that? They expected her to still show unwillingness or make sure Gustav reduced the number of requests, but to their surprise, she accepted just like that. "But don't go overboard with your requests," Lim added. Gustav stared at her for a brief while before replying, "Overboard, eh? I guess we shall see. By the way, what would you like to request for?" she asked. "Nothing comes to mind for now. I'll ask when I think of something," Gustav replied. With this, the tension in the atmosphere disappeared completely. Angie was still staring at Lim with a suspicious expression, while Lim was staring at Gustav with a contemplative expression. "How are you so good?" Lim finally decided to ask Gustav what was on her mind. It wasn't till around 10 in the night before everyone returned to their rooms. The evening had been very interesting and Gustav played a few more games with the rest of the girls. He got to know them better through this. Angie kept dragging him from place to place, and he noticed that she wouldn't let him complete a conversation with Lim before interrupting. Nevertheless, he was able to figure out the background of the girls. Elle, who was the most mature girl in terms of thought, and looks was the daughter of a famous international movie director. Ariana, the playful one, was from a well-off family of martial artists. Lim, as mentioned earlier, was from a very prestigious family, and she happened to be the fiercest out of the three. Angie was the only one whose family background didn't really fit into this group, yet the four of them were best of friends. They never cared about family background. They always cared for and protected one another. Gustav now understood why Angie wasn't tainted like he was. He now understood why she was able to remain innocent and caring. It was all attributed to her group of friends who always watched her back. It would be impossible for anyone to bully her and go scot-free since she had friends that she could count on. He wondered if he would have also remained caring if he had friends that would stand up for him and have his back as they had hers. On one hand, he was a little conflicted, while on the other he was glad that he became like this because he felt Angie was just too naive. There was no way such friends would be there to protect her every time. Gustav worried that if she remained this way and ended up getting broken by the world, she might end up being worse than he is right now. He felt she'd probably turn completely dark and heartless because anyone who was extremely good, nice, and caring had the potential to be extremely evil, vicious, and inhumane. Although it bothered him, Gustav felt this was unlikely to happen if Angie decided to live a casual life. Gustav decided not to sweat it and went to sleep after arriving in his room. The next morning, everyone had woken up at the appropriate time and done all their necessary morning routines. Today was the third day of the exchange event. The students were taken to Lineage City High School again for the duel. When they arrived there, as expected, they were taken to the third training ground in the school. The training ground was like a stadium with spectator seats, and the battleground was in the middle. The difference between the training ground and a stadium was, it was at least 7 times bigger. It was constructed this big so residual attacks from mixed bloods won't make contact with the audience by mistake. The students participating were called out to the battleground a few minutes after everyone arrived. The duel would be in teams. A team consisting of 7 students representing each school. There were some rectangular glowing outlines on the battleground. The rectangular glowing outlines on the battleground were spaced several hundred feet away from one another, and there were up to 6 of them. According to the rules, 2 schools would battle with their teams inside one of the rectangular outlines, each 7 students from a school against 7 others inside the rectangular outline. A person would be disqualified if they were thrown out of the rectangle. The students were laced in tight bodysuits of different colors. The 7 students of Echelon Academy were laced in red bodysuits which depicted which team they belonged to. Every school participant had theirs. The principal started announcing the schools that would be going against one another. Every school would be dueling with another at the same time. That was the reason for having several rectangular rings, so every school would have their match at the same time. Lineage City High School versus Cheryl High School. Both their participants should head to Ring C. Your duel will be taking place there, Principal Dirk announced. Black Rock Schools versus Rose High. Head for Ring D. Principal Dirk kept announcing. Echelon Academy versus Redemption High. Chapter 109. Echelon Academy versus Redemption High. Principal Dirk announced, all participants should please move to Ring A. When Principal Dirk mentioned Echelon Academy, the entire training ground became noisier. Everyone remembered the way Gustav dominated the exchange of knowledge yesterday and hoped there wouldn't be someone who would dominate the dueling session like that. They weren't really bothered since the exchange of knowledge was way different from using their bloodlines to exchange blows and wasn't based on knowledge, instead was based on strength. However, they were still on the lookout for the way Echelon Academy was going to perform today. This was all due to Gustav placing a lot of value on Echelon's Academy's head due to yesterday's win. Ascension Academy versus Eagle Wings High. Participants should please move to Ring F. Principal Dirk announced once again. It took around 1 more minute before he finished announcing the rest of the schools and their opponents. At this moment, all the battle rings were filled by the participants. Ring A was at the southwest corner of the training ground. This was where Echelon Academy and Redemption High were facing off. The 7 participants stood opposite one another. Red bodysuits on the left and yellow bodysuits on the right. Principal Dirk started announcing the rules, and according to them, injuries were allowed. participants could be disqualified by being sent out of the ring or passing out from an injury. There were teachers in charge of healing severe injuries on standby. Also, if a teacher deemed an attack too powerful and felt it could cause irrevocable harm or instant death, they could step in to stop the attack from making contact with the participant. If they did that, the participant who the attack was meant for would be disqualified, but they would only step in if they were certain that the participant couldn't block or survive the attack. Of course, attacking a participant in a bid to kill or cause more injuries after the said participant had passed out would bring about disqualification. All participants had gotten to the Zulu rank, so no one could really predict how the duel would turn out since no mixed blood was lower than that in rank. After announcing the rules completely, the principal left the moderation of the battle to the defense teachers in the school. The participants had taken a battle stance after using the battle formation they were trained with to position themselves properly for effective battling. Once the go-ahead was given for the battle to start, the participants dashed out with vigor towards their opponents. Bam! 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 Sounds of collisions rang out in the air as the participants clashed with one another. Different kinds of attacks were sent out, making the entire training ground chaotic. Cheers! 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 Dash, go Tom, defeat that urchin. Dash, Goddess Asiri. Dash, yes Urarika, give him the whip. The students in the spectators' seat cheered for their favorites as the battle commenced. On Echelon Academy side, Captain Andrew was going against the captain of Redemption High. Both of them had B-grade bloodlines and were also skilled in using their abilities, so it was turning out to be a really fierce battle. The other Echelon Academy participants clashed with the participants of Redemption High. From the first exchange, the more powerful side was determined. Apart from the captain of Redemption High, the rest didn't hold a candle to Echelon Academy participants. They were gradually being pushed back as the battle progressed. The captains of both teams were going full ballistic against each other at the moment. Captain Andrew of Echelon Academy and Captain Ramaru of Redemption High. Andrew had his muscular arms covered in red scales and with 4 pointy claws. His legs from his kneecaps downwards also had the same scales and 4 pointy toes on each foot. His speed along with his attacks that sliced through the air and created burning effects were still dodged by the captain of the other team. Captain Ramaru had 2 black wings sprouting out of his back. The wings were black and surprisingly metallic. At the start of the battle, 2 long feather-like swords protruded out of his black wings, which he grabbed onto and pulled out. These black feathered-like swords were about 4 feet in length each. He had been using them to fight against Andrew since the start of the battle. His flight speed was very fast, allowing him to dodge most of Andrew's attack. However, he also couldn't touch Andrew because the scales covering Andrew's legs also blessed him with good speed. Although Ramaru's speed wasn't as flexible as Andrew's due to Andrew having flight ability, he was still able to keep up pretty fine. They were both well skilled after all. Bam! 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 Both of them clashed repeatedly, causing sounds of metallic collision. Andrew leaped up and spun diagonally with his claws extending forward towards Ramaru's chest. Zwee-yi! His sharp claws sliced and burned through the air crazily and fierce. Clang! 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 Ramaru placed the feather-like swords in front of himself, blocking the multiple spinning swings in mid-air. Due to Andrew's claws slamming onto the feathered-like sword repeatedly, the stacked-up force caused Ramaru to be catapulted backward by a few feet. A red glow spread from the point of contact to other parts of the feathered-like sword. The sword broke into 2 while Ramaru was still being catapulted backward. "Tsh, not again," he said internally as another 2 swords started protruding out of his wings behind. Andrew landed back on his feet after his initial attack and dashed forward at full speed. Swoosh! He arrived before the catapulting Ramaru in an instant and swung his claws towards Ramaru's chest. Ramaru had to stop the process of creating another sword and quickly used his wings to cover himself. Slash! Slash! Clang! Clang! The wings perfectly shielded Ramaru from the multiple slashes Andrew sent out, causing sparks to fly across the place. His wings became red hot, but in a few seconds, they reverted to normal. Chapter 110. Andrew's claws had a certain kind of burning effect. Once his claws made contact with any hard surface, that hard surface was guaranteed to melt from the high temperature of his claws. Romorous feathered swords had been destroyed repeatedly due to the high temperature that could easily burn through a metal plate, but the temperature wasn't high enough to burn through his wings. Seeing that his claws were not able to cut through the wings, Andrew slashed downwards towards his Romorous leg. Swoosh! Romaru reacted by flapping his wings and dashing upwards with speed, causing the claws to miss him. Andrew didn't wait for a second after noticing that his claws didn't connect. He leaped upwards immediately. Whoosh! His body traveled across the air, crossing a height of more than 5 meters in a few seconds. As he was catching up with Romaru in midair, he slashed out again from underneath. At this time, Romaru had finished recreating the feathered swords and dragged them out of his wings to clash with Andrew. Blam! The sword and the claws clashed just as they crossed the 12 meters mark above the ground. Bam! Seeing that his attack was blocked, he kept slash out severally, but Romaru also returned the attacks by swinging at Andrew's claws repeatedly. Bam! Slash! Bam! Slash! Bam! Slash! Bam! Andrew was still able to slash out a few more times in midair before the law of gravity started pulling him downwards. As he descended, Romaru flapped his wings again and followed his descent while swinging out the feathered swords in his left hand. The sword headed for Andrew's neck with intense speed. It was only a few inches from making contact with his neck as they closed in on the ground. Andrew raised his right arm to block the sword and also threw out his left arm. Slash! Skrych. Romarus' sword cut 3 inches deep into Andrew's right arm, while Andrew's left hand cut 3 long slashes across Romarus' chest. Bang! They both landed on the ground with their bodies bleeding. Andrew landed on his back, while Romaru landed on his front. Both of them immediately jumped back up to their feet after landing in that manner and dashed towards each other again. It was as if they didn't feel any pain with the way they stood up and dashed towards each other again with their bodies bleeding profusely. Just when they were several inches away from making contact with each other again, a blue beam suddenly appeared from the right side. Bam! It slammed into Romarus' side, catapulting his entire body several hundred feet towards the side. His wings had blocked a part of the beam due to reflex action, but the remaining power was enough to still send him flying. He stabilized himself after flying towards the side for a few more seconds while blood leaked out of his nose. He hovered above the ground while checking out the source of the attack. A blue cannon made of light was standing on the left side of the battle ring. The attack shot out earlier had come from his blind spot. He was focusing on his battle with Andrew, so he didn't notice it until it was too late. A long blue-haired beauty sat on the cannon, which was currently pointing at him. "You didn't think I was the only powerful mixed blood here, did you?" Andrew said with a strong voice. "Even your impenetrable wings will not be able to stop her cannons from ripping you apart," Andrew said before dashing towards Romaru again. Romaru figured that one of his teammates had already been disqualified, which was the reason for his current predicament. Toy. Another beam shot out as he dashed forward also. Swoosh. He was able to easily dodge the beams now that he knew about them. Swoosh. Toy. Swoosh. Toy. He dodged the cannons several times as he flew across the air before arriving in front of Andrew. Another battle commenced, but Romaru was not able to fight effectively like before. He would have to dodge the deadly beams, which for some reason couldn't hurt Andrew even when it made contact with his body. This made Romaru go from attack to defense. Bang, 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 bang. After trading blows repeatedly, one of Andrew's attacks finally connected with Romarus' body, blowing him back, but before Romaru could stabilize himself, the blue beam slammed into him again while he was still in midair. Bang! He was once again catapulted towards the left while spitting out blood. His body was still spiraling in midair when he noticed a monstrous-looking green foot suddenly appear from his right side and kicked forward forcefully. The large foot slammed into his ribs with intensity. Splurt! He spat out a mouthful of blood as his ribcage collapsed with his body sent flying towards the right. Another one. Romarus' eyes were currently spinning with his face showing an expression of pain, yet he was still able to analyze a bulky-looking beast with green skin standing on the side. "Another one of my teammates has lost?" Ronmaru said internally as he flapped his wings, causing his body to suddenly ascend with speed. Swoosh! Boom! A loud explosion rocked the air around him when he reached the height of 20 meters, and the strong blast it created sent him tumbling down. Bang! Even when his body slammed to the ground, he still didn't know what hit him. Ronmaru was also unaware that at this moment all his teammates had been kicked out of the ring, and he was the only one left. Right now it was 7 against 1. Ronmaru was only able to hold on for a few seconds more before he was also sent crashing out of the ring with a battered body full of diverse injuries. All teammates of Redemption High have been evicted from the ring. Echelon Academy wins. A loud voice that announced the defeat of Redemption High and the win of Echelon Academy reverberated across the training ground. Cheers! 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 The students erupted in cheers. Echelon Academy was the first to defeat their opponents, but after a few minutes, other schools were also starting to finish up. Atrahia City High wins. Salvation Academy wins. As time passes, more and more announcements were heard. Black Rock School's wins. Gustav only clapped when the announcement for Black Rock School winning was made. When Echelon Academy's win was announced earlier, he didn't even react. From the spectator's seat on the east side, he stared at Black Rock participants coming out of the battle ring. "Good job, Angie," he muttered with a smile. Chapter 111. "Good job, Angie," he said with a slight smile. Angie happened to be one of the participants representing Black Rock Schools. Not only did she participate, she was also one of the participants that supported the most during this duel. Her speed outstripped that of every other participant, and her combat power was not lacking either. Although it still fell far short of Gustav's prowess, it was nothing to scoff at, especially in this battle where everyone was slower than she was. Gustav also noticed that her speed had increased since the last time they raced. She was able to use a new ability with her bloodline that was also related to speed. Gustav figured that it was similar to him using sprint, however there was a difference. Angie's speed was multiplied by 4 times when she making use of this ability, and although she couldn't maintain it for long before running out of energy, being able to use it for 10 seconds was more than enough to cause havoc on the battleground because it was more than 2 times of Gustav's speed when he activated sprint. Angie used her speed to take out 2 participants from the opposing side. She was seen as the most valued player since the rest of her teammates were able to focus on the strongest participant due to her help. This led to their win since the battle power of the strongest participant on the opposing side was more powerful than their strongest participant. The first round came to an end and the schools that won were announced. Echelon Academy, Atrahia City High School, Salvation Academy, Black Rock Schools, Brer Bullet High, and Reflection Academy. Now that the other schools had been disqualified, the next round was only going to involve the participants from these 6 schools. The principal of Atrahia City High had announced the commencement of the second round after all the participants who lost earlier left the training ground. Echelon Academy versus Briar Bullet High. Participants should move to Ring A. Atrahia City High versus Salvation Academy. Participants should move to Ring C. Reflection Academy versus Black Rock Schools. Participants should move to Ring E. Principal Dirk announced in successions and left the rest to the referees. The participants were back inside the ring facing different opponents this time. In the second round, another rule was implemented. Every school now had 3 substitution slots which they could use in exchanging a player, so even if a participant was disqualified, it was possible to send in another participant from the same school to fill in the slot. This could only be done 3 times, and every school had the opportunity to do it, so unless a school defeated another school very quickly to the point where no substitutes were able to be called on, they would still have to battle at least 10 participants from that school to win. After a brief moment of speaking, the go-ahead was given for the second round to begin. The participants lunged towards one another again with battle intent. Bang, 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 bang. Chaotic sounds collision rang out again as they clashed with one another. The students and the spectators were cheering for their favorites once again while watching the duel with a tense look. Gustav, which school do you think has the highest chance of winning? A mature feminine voice questioned from Gustav's left side. Gustav turned to the side to stare at her for a few seconds with a look of contemplation before turning back to stare at the battle rings. The other two females on Gustav's right also had expressions that shown they were also interested in listening to Gustav's reply. Among all the schools, Echelon Academy and Atrahia City High School have the highest combat power. Also, their battle formation and the way they battle with such teamwork is better than the rest of the teams, so I can say with almost 100% certainty that the final round will be between both teams, Gustav explained with a solemn look. The girls who were sitting beside him were L, Ariana, and Lim. L was seated on his left side while Lim and Ariana were seated on his right. Does that mean our Blackrock school doesn't stand a chance of winning? L asked with a look of dissatisfaction. Gustav stared at the battlefield again with a contemplative look before replying, I don't think so. At most your school will take third place. Gustav had studied the initial battle of all the schools, so he could tell that Blackrock School's participants were lacking in prowess compared to the rest of the schools that also won. The only reason why he felt Blackrock might have a chance to get to the final round was because of Angie. Having Angie on their team was a huge plus for them. Even if by any chance she happened to not be powerful enough to defeat the opponent placed before her, she still had enough speed to disrupt the flow of attack on the battlefield and cause distractions. These feats were enough to score victories for Blackrock schools if they could manage the way she was used properly on the battlefield. The only issue was that tactic couldn't work forever. As they kept using it, other participants would analyze and find a way to counter it unless they were idiots. Just as Gustav was analyzing this, it was already happening on the battlefield. Angie just happened to receive a hit from one of their opponents and ended up almost being sent out of the ring. Although she wasn't using her highest speed when the attack hit, the speed she was using was still higher than that of everyone's, so she shouldn't have been hit. The reason for this was they were starting to predict her movement patterns after she managed to successfully land hits on two of their teammates and sent them out of the ring. Another thing Gustav had noticed was Angie was not decisive enough when she wanted to hit an opponent. When it came to hitting people, she would hesitate, which usually affected her movement for a moment. Chapter 112. She had been battling softly since the beginning by only pushing them out of the ring with her speed, but she hadn't truly hit anyone hard, and this was kind of affecting her efficiency, but she didn't notice. Reflection Academy had stronger participants, but now that two of their teammates had been thrown out of the battle ring, it was only a matter of time before they lost. On Echelon Academy's side, they were doing pretty well too. Unlike the first school they faced that had a strong captain, this one only had an average one. It took them no longer than 10 minutes to end the battle and became the first to win the second round again. Echelon Academy wins. When this announcement was made for the second time, the students spectating had no doubts about Echelon Academy's prowess being one of the highest, if not the highest here. Those that knew the history of Echelon Academy weren't surprised, since it was said to be where some powerful and well-known MBO officers graduated from. The principals of other schools were among the spectators that weren't surprised by their prowess. Atrahia City's principal created the Exchange of Knowledge event, just so Atrahia City could win at least one of the two events that took place, but now it was looking like he would be disappointed. Some minutes after Echelon Academy won, Atrahia City High School also won their duel. Everyone's power level on their team was pretty much balanced. Their bloodlines complemented each other and were able to cover up the weakness of their teammates. The other team from Salvation Academy had a bloodline user with a pretty insane power level. He had Engrade bloodline. He could transform into a mutated bear that had the ability to restructure the distribution of force. A lot of the participants from Atrahia City High team couldn't harm him with their abilities at first. No matter how they hit, it just wouldn't be powerful enough to make him flinch. This was because he was controlling the energy of the force around him, hence making their attacks weaker before they could touch him. He could also amplify the force behind his attack. The captain of the team, Zim, studied him to discover his flaw when he noticed that they wouldn't be able to defeat him easily. What he figured out was the speed of the creature the opponent transformed into was lacking, so he devised a plan and worked in accordance to it with his teammates. They avoided him and focused on dealing with the other teammates first. After that was done, all of them attacked him at the same time. Of course, It would be impossible for him to reduce the force of every single attack coming from up to 7 people around him. Eventually, he was beaten up and thrown out of the ring. The last school to win was Blackrock School, and it took them quite some time, even after Angie had assisted in defeating the 2 weakest teammates from the opposing team earlier. Angie was still hailed as the most supportive teammate, and everyone had to admit that she was the reason the team was still able to hold on. Now that 3 more teams had been defeated, only 3 were left: Echelon Academy, Atrahia City High, and Black Rock Schools. The principal announced that there would be a few minutes break for the participants to rest before the commencement of the 3rd round. "Let's go see Angie." Lim grabbed Gustav's right arm while standing up, pulling him along with her. "All right," Gustav said while standing up. Elle and Ariana exchanged glances before also standing up and following behind the both of them. They walked towards where the participants were positioned, which was beneath the spectators' seats. They could already spot Angie in the distance, and she just happened to spot them too. She was clad in all black, same with the rest of the participants from Blackrock Schools. Angie started waving excitedly at them, but when she noticed Lim holding onto Gustav's hand as they approached, she pouted her lips and walked towards them. When she arrived in front of them, she immediately jumped into Gustav's embrace, causing his hand to be released from Lim's grip. Gasp! The crowd surrounding them were surprised at the sudden intimacy. Gustav and Angie are dating? This was the thought circulating in their minds at the moment after Angie did that. Even Gustav was surprised by the sudden hug. Although this wasn't the first time, he was still surprised since his life wasn't in any form of danger this time. "Did I do well?" she asked Gustav with a sweet smile after disengaging from him. "H&M, you did well," Gustav replied with a smile too. The moment looked magical since Gustav wasn't the type to smile all the time, except he was up to something mischievous. "This is all thanks to you," Angie stated. Me?" Gustav asked with a look of confusion. "H&M," Angie nodded in reply. "Have you forgotten those nights?" she asked. Gasp! Another loud gasp was heard from the crowd surrounding them. They spend nights together? Hearing that gave the crowd a lot to think of, especially those from Blackrock School who didn't know about Gustav being her neighbor. Angie happened to be popular among her peers in Blackrock School, so this came as a surprise to most of them who saw her as an angel that would never fall for any guy. The male students who were secretly admirers cursed themselves for not having the guts to approach her all this time. "Oh," Gustav muttered with a smile. He remembered those nights he spent observing the neighborhood with her were mostly mixed-breed free due to his calculations, so instead of lazying around, he decided to give Angie speed tasks to help her improve the usage of her ability. Gustav hadn't thought anything of it, but Angie was really grateful and believed her current improvement was due to that. "It's all you. You don't need to thank me," Gustav said with a dismissive look while Angie's smile broadened even more. Due to the eyes surrounding them, they decided to move their conversations somewhere else. They found a place within the training ground to speak. After an hour had gone by, the announcement was made for the continuation of the duel. Gustav advised Angie not to push herself too much. He didn't bother trying to tell her to be ruthless when attacking her opponents because he knew a person's nature wasn't so easily changed. Angie's nature just happened to be the soft kind. After the spectating students took their seats, the 3rd round commenced. Echelon Academy would be going against Atrahia City High, while Blackrock School would be sitting this one out. The principal explained that the loser gets to battle Blackrock School, and if the participants from Blackrock School were to win, they'd get the chance to battle for the first place. After everything was explained, the principal gave the go-ahead for the duel to begin. Echelon Academy versus Atrahia City High. It was practically red versus blue. On the left side, Echelon Academy participants were laced in full red bodysuits, while Atrahia City High participants were laced in blue. Chapter 113. The battle went off with the 7 students going against each other. Gustav watched from his seating position with a look of boredom. Unlike the rest who were intrigued about knowing which school was going to win, Gustav already had a school picked as the winner in his mind. Even though he watched with a bored look, he still analyzed the details of the battle as it played out. Blast! 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 The entire vicinity echoed with blasts as the battle continued. On a side of the battle ring, two students with similar bloodlines were duking it out. Both of them could enlarge different parts of their bodies. They would occasionally enlarge their arms before throwing a fist. When the huge enlarged fists made contact with one another, the sound was like two rocks smashing onto one another. Although it looked like they were even in terms of strength, Gustav already noticed that the one in red had the upper hand in fighting techniques. On another side, a girl who materialized a blue energy tank with several mega cannons kept firing a blue blast at a large rocky-looking 2-meter-tall creature. That creature was a mixed blood. The battles occurring at every part of the ring were fierce. At this time, the captain of Echelon Academy, Andrew, was going against two participants at a time. Surprisingly, he was able to hold them off on his own. One would wonder where the seventh participant of Echelon Academy was located, since they couldn't be found on the battlefield, but in the next minute, an explosion rang out. Boom! Two participants in blue were thrown out of the ring due to the intense explosion. Dust spread everywhere from the point of impact. With that, Atrahea City High had lost two participants, but since they still had students in the ring, they could send one of their substitutes in. The person who was responsible for the explosion was the seventh student who had been hiding beneath the ground since. No one saw him enter the ground at the beginning of the match because the girl who could create energy cannons covered his actions up when she did that. The participants of Atrahea City High had been suspicious when they noticed that someone had disappeared from the ring, but they weren't given the chance to think about it since they were attacked fiercely by the opponents. The attacks of these six were on par with a team of 7, so they had no choice but to fight. The missing participant had a bloodline that enabled him to use his body and create some special bombs that served as a kind of landmine. Two of the participants that were battling Andrew earlier before being disqualified stepped on the ground where it was inserted, and both of them were blasted out of the ring with hideous-looking injuries on their bodies. Two substitutes were sent in to replace them after that, but even with that, the tide of the battle had turned. Atrahea City's high participants had to tread the battle ring with caution now. They had no idea where bombs had been set on the battleground, and no one wanted to end up like those two. Also, Andrew was an example that the bombs wouldn't detonate if a student of Echelon Academy stepped on any part of the land where it was positioned. The fight continued as the Atrahea City High participants decided to gather together in a particular part of the ring where they wouldn't take a step forward or backward. They formed a kind of circle at the southeast part of the ring with their backs facing one another. They wanted to protect themselves from stepping on a landmine, hence the reason for this action. The battle continued, and no explosions were heard for several minutes after they made this decision. All of a sudden, one of them, who was sensitive to sound, shouted for everyone to move away, but before they could respond, another blast rang out. Boom! 3 participants who were not able to escape in time were sent flying out of the ring. One of them was blasted into the air, but still within the ring. While he was falling to the ground, Captain Andrew leaped upwards and thrust out his leg. Bam! His right feet slammed into the belly of a participant while still in midair, causing his body to be sent flying out of the ring. Gasp! Dash, Captain Zim was defeated just like that? Dash, Atrahea High is finished. The person who had just been kicked out was the captain of the team. Andrew never engaged him till now. He left the captain to Yuhiko all this time, and Yuhiko did a good job of keeping him at bay. What Atrahea City High participants didn't know from the start was, the bombs underneath the ground could move at will and change their positions if the person responsible for putting them there wanted that to happen. This was the major reason behind the disaster that had just happened. The captain of Atrahea City High glared at the ring furiously upon being sent out of it. He wanted to get back in, but the blue force that surrounded the ring held him back. He still had enough strength to fight because his bloodline protected him from getting injured by the blast, but there was nothing he could do at the moment. He had a look of frustration as he walked back to where the rest of substitutes and disqualified participants were seated. It didn't take up to 3 minutes before the last participants of Atrahea City High were thrown out. Echelon Academy had won the duel again. Everyone was surprised again because they expected Echelon Academy participants to really have a hard time. To their surprise, it wasn't all that too difficult for them. The principal of Atrahea City School sighed from his seating position. He had expected this to happen, but it was still humiliating nevertheless for a school from another city to defeat them in their own city. Now that Echelon Academy had won this round again, everyone knew that they had practically won. Echelon Academy hadn't been crowned winner because Atrahia City High and Blackrock School still had to battle. If Blackrock School won, they still had the chance to battle with Echelon Academy for the first place, but if they lost, they'd have to settle for the third spot. Everyone knew Echelon Academy had practically won since Blackrock School were lower in terms of prowess. After the battle ended, some time was given for the participants to take a break. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The students in the spectator's seat started talking about how Atrahia City's high school was easily defeated. Dash, Yuhiko is a goddess. Dash, Andrew is the best. See the way he planned the tricking of the teammates. I wonder how they were trained to fight with such format and scheming. Chapter 114. Gustav listened to the words of the students around him with a poker face. He was also analyzing the battle and understood how it turned out to be this way. Gustav was learning a lot from all their battles. He had taken note of the pros and flaws of the battles. After some time had passed again, the second duel began. It was Blackrock School against Atrahia City High this time. Angie and the rest of her 6 teammates were prepared to duke it out with Atrahia City High participants. Their faces showed determination and fierceness. Although everyone had judged that they would fail, Blackrock School were not ready to give in just yet. Once the go-ahead for the battle was given, they immediately put their plans into motion. The battle went on for about 10 minutes before the first participant of Blackrock School was sent flying out of the ring. Blackrock participants did all they could to win, but in less than 5 minutes another participant from their side had been thrown out. Now that they had brought in 2 substitutes, only 1 slot was left, and it was looking like they would be making use of that third slot anytime soon. I can't lose like this, he's watching, Angie said in her mind as she dashed backward to dodge a large Rocky like palm. She was currently keeping the captain of the opposing team in place since he was responsible for sending 2 of her teammates out earlier. Angie had been running around him with her normal speed, so she wouldn't spend all her energy at once, but she noticed that just like their former opponents, he was starting to recognize her movement patterns, so she decided to take her speed up the notch. Her other teammates were busy dealing with the rest. The captain of Atrahia City High was a half-rocky monster now with thick rock-like muscles protruding out of different parts of his body, especially his knuckles. When his fist touched the former 2, it tore through their body like it was tofu. Angie was pained by that, so she decided to be the one to take him on. Even if they were to lose here, she didn't want her teammates to suffer in his hands. Let me defeat him myself then, Angie said internally and dashed out again. Swoosh! A third horn protruded out of her forehead. She arrived in front of Captain Zim. The entire audience and Zim were shocked to see her growing a third horn out of nowhere. Zim swung out his fist towards her, but his hand phased through thin air as Angie swerved towards the side and appeared behind him. She pushed out both her arms towards his back with speed. Bam! Zim was pushed 50 feet forward by Angie. Now the audience along with Zim knew what the third horn was supposed to do. Angie had become so fast that she was literally a blur. She bolted forward again with extreme speed, while the Zim's fist turned into a long pointy rock which he stabbed forward at her. Angie was able to dodge this thrust with ease again, and her hand located a part of his body that wasn't covered by rocks before thrusting out her palm again. Bam! Zim was once again pushed back by about 30 feet. The entire audience was amazed. Angie didn't wait for more than a second before dashing out again. Swoosh! Bam! Swoosh! Bam! Swoosh! Bam! The captain of Atrahia City High was being pushed around for a few seconds. He was unable to follow Angie's speed. I'll run of energy if I don't go back to my normal form now. Angie came to a realization after dashing out again. She decided that she would inflict a serious injury on Zim this time before reverting to normal. Angie dashed towards his left this time as her sight closed in on his rib area, a few centimeters below his armpit. Since the Zim thrusted out his fist again, he was wide open. Angie gathered up a lot of speed in her arms before throwing a fist towards that part of the captain's body. The air rippled with intensity as the fist arrived before his body. All of a sudden, Angie remembered what happened when she used this attack before and changed her mind. She opened her palm and turned her fist into a palm strike. Bam! The captain was pushed back again, but surprisingly, he wasn't injured in any way. Angie stood in place with a confounded look as her horns retracted. The amount of speed generated before she thrust out her hand was enough to break through a wall, even though it was weakened when she turned it into a palm strike. Earlier, she felt her palm struck a hard surface. She stared at the captain. She noticed his smirk. I hate speedsters like you. You really give a lot of problems, but it's not hard to predict your moves after taking a beating for a while. But I hate you more than I hate any other speedster. He voiced out before dashing forward. Even though I put up that fake weak point to fool you, that could have still been a lethal injury for me had you decided to truly attack me. But you're being nice, eh? The captain shouted out as he thrust his fist towards her face. Swoosh! Angie dodged towards the right, causing the fist to miss her by a few inches. Now she understood what had just happened, and also the fact that she could have broken through his defense if she punched instead of using a palm strike. Even as her horns had retracted, she was still faster than the captain. She dodged him repeatedly and was about to attack him again when he suddenly paused his movements and raised both hands to connect them. Pa! Immediately he clapped his hands together. Small diamond-like stones shot out of his body in hundreds. Prick! 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 It took everyone by surprise because he never used such an attack before. Projectiles from his body shot across the battlefield, stabbing into some of the students. Plop! I really dislike goody two-shoes like you. The captain of Atrahia City High walked towards Angie as he spoke. Angie was laying on the ground with sharp stones pierced into different parts of her body. Her legs were pierced by more than 10 of them and were currently bleeding. You really have the guts to be nice on the battlefield? The captain bent and grabbed Angie by the neck before lifting her. Her face shone pain with the way his rocky hands were tightened around her neck, but she wasn't powerful enough to free herself from his grasp. Chapter 115. The battlefield is not for soft-hearted weaklings like you. Zim arched his right arm back as he spoke. He stared at a part of her body where some of the stones he shot out earlier penetrated. One of the pointy stones was protruding from her left belly area. He pushed his palm forward with intensity towards that location. Bam! His palm slapped onto the rock, pushing it further into her belly and causing blood to spurt out. Blurg! Angie vomited out blood as her face turned pale. Her face showed extreme pain at the moment, and it looked so heart-wrenching. Zim still kept holding onto her neck and lifting her. He arched his arm back again and thrust out. Bam! This time it was a stone on her left shoulder that was pushed 7 inches into Angie's body, shattering her collarbone. GHRRHH! Angie exclaimed in pain. She felt indescribable pain in her left shoulder area. Her left arm fell weakly to the side. She was unable to raise it again due to the pain and her collarbone being shattered. Lutmego, Angie muttered weakly while spitting out more blood. Weaklings don't get the chance to make demands. Soft-heartedness is for the weak. Zim pushed his hand forward again. Bam! His palm pushed another stone that pierced into her right side, deep into her body. Blood oozed out of Angie's body from the 3 spots Zim attacked. She had never felt such pain before, and even though she tried to fight Zim using her right arm, it was all fruitless. Bam! 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 Zim repeatedly attacked all the spots where Angie's body was pierced, causing her to bleed out. Blood oozed out of her body and fell to the ground in small droplets. Gasp! The entire audience was surprised about the sudden brutality their view was being subjected to. Dash, what is he doing? Dash, why is he attacking her like that? Dash, she doesn't need to be subjected to such pain. Just throw her out. Dash, bull. You shameless prick. The student uproars could be heard clearly, especially from Blackrock students. Zim acted like he didn't hear their complaints. He threw Angie's body to the ground, causing her back to slam onto the hard ground with intensity, and started walking towards her again. This bastard. Why can't he just throw her out? Is all this necessary? Lim was incensed seeing the way Zim was handling Angie. Angie is being violated. Why isn't the principal of Atrehia City High saying anything about this? Elle said with a squeezed-up face. Ariana stared at the ring with a dark look also. The usual look of playfulness on her face had disappeared. Even Principal Airhill hasn't said a word, which means unless Angie passes out or gets thrown out, he can't interfere, Elle stated. Everyone knew just how tenacious mixed bloods were, so passing out wasn't something that would happen anytime soon. In the west corner where the principals were seated, Principal Airhill of Blackrock School currently had a look of anguish on his face as he spoke. What is the meaning of this, Principal Dirk? He voiced out. What is the meaning of what? Principal Dirk asked with a confounded look. Can't you see what your student is doing to mine? Principal Airhill said with an incensed tone. What do you mean, Principal Airhill? When did we mention that this was against the rules? From what I see, your student is still conscious. Principal Dirk replied with a dismissive look. You know that this goes against morals. If your student wanted to throw her out, he could have done that already. Why does he have to make her pass through such tortures? She should be disqualified since she can no longer fight. Principal Airhill stood up with a look of anguish as he spoke. Moral? Ha ha ha. Principal Airhill must be a comedian. Principal Dirk laughed for a while before his face suddenly turned serious. On the battlefield, the enemies will show no such morals when killing your beloved students. She should learn the consequences of her actions. The battlefield is not a place for soft-heartedness, Principal Dirk stated. But you. Before Principal Airhill could complete his statement, he was interrupted by another principal. I agree with Principal Dirk. That student could have dealt him a huge blow but chose not to. She's suffering the consequences of her actions. The battlefield is not a place for mercy. Principal Irwin also spoke. Some other principals also agreed that no rule was being broken here. Principal Airhill had no choice but to take his seat with a look of defeat. Back in the spectators' area, the three girls were still thinking of what to do. We can't just leave that bastard to keep handling her like that, Lim shouted out with a look of anguish. At this moment Zim raised his foot and stomped down on Angie's leg. The sounds of bone cracking could be heard clearly as he did that repeatedly. You bastard! What are you doing? Let her go. Ariana had tears spilling out of her eyes as she attempted to jump out of the spectators' area, but Elle and Lim grabbed her. The barrier will prevent you from going in, Elle said. There was a kind of protection set around the rings that prevented entry when battles were going on. It was possible to throw someone out, but impossible to enter until the battle was over or the officials willed it. Some of the audience had disturbed looks on their faces as they saw the captain of Atrehia City High stomping on Angie's leg repeatedly. The stones that had pierced into her legs earlier were now embedded deep within. Angie's other teammates within the battlefield were being handled by Atrehia City's high participants. W high AREYOU do INGTHs? Angie still hadn't passed out even after being subjected to such an amount of torture. Her voice trembled in pain as she spoke. Her entire outfit was soaked in blood, and her body shivered occasionally due to the intense pain. She still couldn't understand what she had done wrong. When did showing mercy become a bad thing? She wondered internally. You're a speedster, right? Stomp. Those legs. Stomp. I will make them incapable of running. Stomp. After stomping in all the stones, Zim picked Angie up again. At this point, she had lost feeling in her left leg, while her right leg hurt like it was crushed by a moving truck. Not that she knew how that felt, but she had never felt such intense pain. In the spectator's seat, Gustav had been staring at the battlefield while leaning forward with his jaw resting on both of his arms. Soft-heartedness doesn't belong on the battlefield. Zim's words drifted into his ears. Even though it wasn't loud, his perception allowed him to perceive the small echoes carried by the winds. Gustav, what do you think we can do? Lim asked with a look of helplessness. Gustav slowly removed both hands from underneath his jaws and stood up. Stay here, Gustav said while turning around to leave. Chapter 116. What do you mean by stay here? Angie is being brutalized. We have to do something. Ariana voiced out like an animal brandishing her fangs and ready to bite Gustav if he responded with an unsatisfactory answer. Gustav turned to look at her and placed his hand on her head. It's gonna be fine. Remain here. Gustav sounded calm when saying this, but a sudden chill permeated the environment as he turned around. Everyone in that vicinity could feel the chill infiltrate deep into them, but they couldn't understand where it was coming from. It felt like something crazy was about to go down. Before the girls could react to Gustav's last statement, he had already disappeared into the distance. Only the crowd of students, most seating while some standing, could be seen. In Blackrock participants' seating area, the substitutes and the others that have been disqualified had their mouths open wide as they stared at the battleground. Their seating area was very close to the battle ring, so they could see on a much closer and clearer scale than the rest of the participants. Falco, it's time for you to go in. You'll be the last substitute entering, the coach of the team said towards a boy with white hair sitting on the second line. Falco looked a bit timid upon hearing that. He stared at the battlefield where only about 3 participants from Blackrock School were left in the ring. Others had been disqualified, and right now the participants of Atrahia City High were messing around with the ones that were left. Coach, I think the battle is pretty much over. Going in there will not change anything, Falco replied. No, Falco, you must get revenge for us. The other side will wake if they treat you the same way, so you're the only one that I can think of, the coach said with a decisive look. Coach, you know I can't control it, Falco said with a pale face. Falco, stop arguing and go up there, the coach commanded. Coach, I have to use the restroom. I've been holding my pee for a long time. If I head to the battle ring this way, I might piss myself when taking a beating, Falco said and stood up. The coach stared at him with a suspicious look, but decided not to forcefully put him in the battle with a full bladder. Falco walked out of their seating area and towards the nearest restroom. After a minute had gone by, the coach was about to pick another person to go in, thinking Falco wasn't going to show up. He was fed up with watching Angie receive torture over and over again. It was truly a triggering sight, and he wished he could interfere, but he wasn't allowed to. I'm back, coach. Can I go in now? Falco said with vigor from the side as he approached. The coach was a bit surprised by the look of confidence, but there was no time to think of arguing about that. Go in. I can't stand this anymore, the coach voiced out. Falco nodded and walked towards the stage, catching the attention of the crowd. Hey, Blackrock is putting in another substitute. What is the point of adding a substitute now? He's just going to end up like her. He looks pretty weak also. The students watched as the barrier around the stage opened up for Falco to go in. They were worried about what was going to be the outcome again. Zim was torturing Angie on the southwest part of the battlefield. The participants of Atrahia City High noticed the newcomer and started moving towards him with nefarious intent written all over their faces. Falco stared at the southwest corner and noticed that Zim had raised Angie again. This time his right fist transformed into a pointed stone-like diamond. He arched his arm back to the limit while holding Angie up. Angie at this point was almost at the brink of losing consciousness, but she could still see that Zim was about to stab right through her with his diamond-like fist. DLNTI, haven't to LD she muttered weakly as more blood trickled out the side of her mouth. No cares about what a soft-hearted weakling says. Zim stabbed towards her stomach with his diamond-like fist as he spoke. 3 participants of Atrahia City High had also surrounded Falco at this point, but he suddenly dashed out of the encirclement. Swoosh! His speed was faster than they could react to. They turned around and noticed that he had arrived before Zim and Angie. Zim's hand was close to stabbing through Angie's belly when Falco suddenly appeared in between them. Tum! Zim's diamond hand collided with Falco's chest, but instead of penetrating, a metallic sound rang out. Zim pushed his diamond hand forward with a look of confusion, yet it couldn't pierce through Falco's chest. Who are? Before he could complete his sentence, he noticed a palm headed for his chest with an intense speed that it sounded like the air was being torn apart. Fwoosh! Although Zim couldn't counter due to his speed, he wasn't worried in any way since his chest was defended by a rocky surface. Bam! To his surprise, when the palm made contact with his chest, the rocky surface cracked from the impact and he was pushed back by about 70 feet. He subconsciously let go of Angie when he was sent flying by the palm strike. Angie's body dropped from the air listlessly. Grab. Falco turned around with speed and quickly grabbed onto her body before she could fall to the ground. He lifted her princess style and stared at her face. He didn't know why, but he could feel a rage building up inside him upon seeing her blood-soaked face. Her body was also covered in blood, and holes could be seen on multiple parts which were pierced by sharp stones. His face turned extremely dark as he walked towards the edge of the battle ring. "They'll be back. Just wait right there like a good little boy for me," he said to Zim without turning around. Zim stared at Falco's back with a look of astonishment. The palm strike he received earlier rocked his internals to the core, causing him to feel pain within his chest. His defense was top-notch, and no one had been able to do that to him with just a casual attack. "Who is this person?" he voiced out with a confused look. Falco arrived at the edge of the ring where two medics were already waiting. He passed Angie over to the man. "Please take care of her," he said, and turned around to head towards Zim again. The medic nodded at him and turned around to go give medical attention to Angie. "Now shall we begin?" Falco voiced out while staring at Zim. Chapter 117. Now shall we begin? Falco voiced out while staring at Zim with a chilly gaze. "I don't know who you are or why someone as strong as you are would only be arriving at the battlefield now, but what I did was necessary, and am sure you can agree with me. The battlefield is not for soft-hearted weaklings," Zim said while trying to put on a righteous look. "Soft-hearted weaklings, eh? What about hard-hearted weaklings?" Falco asked with a solemn look while taking small steps forward. "The battlefield is not for weaklings at all, whether soft-hearted or not," Zim replied with a look of revulsion. "Good, I'm glad you admit that it's not for weaklings," Falco said as he moved another step forward. 10 times of what happened to her should also be inflicted on weaklings, don't you think?" Falco asked with a small smirk forming on his face. 10 times? Looks like you're edgier than I am for you to say I should have inflicted 10 times the pain on her, ha ha ha. I really like you. We should become friends after I send you out of the ring today," Zim said with a light burst of laughter as his cracked rocky chest started mending. 3 participants from Atrahia City High were already encircling Falco from 3 separate directions. "You misunderstood me. You see, that girl is 1,000 times stronger than you are, which means you guys are the true weaklings, and since we both agree that weaklings should be dealt with, guess who's next on the menu?" While speaking, Falco clenched his fist so tight that popping sounds echoed around the vicinity. "What? You idiot, even if you're stronger than I am, I still have the advantage in number. You." Before Zim could complete his statement, Falco suddenly dashed forward unexpectedly. Swoosh! He appeared in front of the 3rd student on the right like a phantom. Whoosh! He jumped high in the air and spun around with his leg swinging forward. Bam! His leg accurately smacked the participant on the left side of his face, sending him flying while spitting out blood. The other 2 were shocked once again by the speed and quickly activated their bloodline ability before dashing towards Falco. Black flames erupted from the body of the one participant on the left, while the one on the right turned her arms into green tentacles. The tentacles elongated and turned into large hammers which she swung towards Falco. At the same time, a ball of black flames that were as large as half of a human shot forward with intensity, burning the air and causing the temperature to increase significantly. Falco turned around to face them and dashed forward once again with speed. When the tentacles, hammers, and black fire were about to make contact, he suddenly bent his body backward. He descended so low that his back was nearly touching the ground as he slid across it. SHHHSSHH. The fire and tentacle hammers missed his body due to the descent. As his body slid across the ground, he suddenly slapped his left hand on the ground and used it to support the weight of his body before spinning with intensity. Swee-eye. His legs along with his body rotated and swept across the ground in a circular format. Pa. Pa. His feet collided with their legs in the process, causing their legs to be swept off the ground as their body flipped repeatedly across the air. Bam! Falco used his hand to push his body upwards, and while the two participants were still rotating in midair, his body lifted as high as 3 meters, and he proceeded to reach out both his hands to grab the two participants' heads while in midair. He pulled both heads towards him and slammed them together with force. Blam! The sound was similar to two watermelons getting crushed. Blood squirted out of both their heads as they fell limply to the ground. Gasp! The entire audience was in shock. Dash, how does BlackRock have a strong participant like this? Dash, why wasn't he used in the initial round? These words circulated around the spectators' seats. Lim, Elle, and Ariana stared at the battle ring with suspicious gazes. They recognized Falco, but they couldn't understand why the coach would let him on the battlefield when he couldn't control what was within him. Falco was said to have awakened a bloodline that gave him a powerful but uncontrollable alter ego. Whenever his alter ego was in control, disaster always occurred depending on where he was at that moment. Most times they would be able to keep it under control since the alter ego's strength didn't surpass the Zulu rank, but other times they weren't so lucky. There was a time it took control of him when he was still in middle school and he ended up killing 2 of his classmates. This was hidden underneath the wraps since he was from a rich family. Luckily, as he grew, he was able to keep his alter ego in check. It only forcefully took over his body when he was in danger. The difference between him and the alter ego was the opposite personality. Also, unknown black tattoos would suddenly appear all over his skin. The coach, on the other hand, stared at the battlefield with an astonished expression. This was what he wanted after seeing Angie get tortured. He still had a look of suspicion mixed in with astonishment because he hadn't expected Falco to be able to do this without being controlled by his alter ego. He knew it was impossible for Falco to harm anyone in his normal state due to Falco being a soft-hearted wimp, but he couldn't understand why there were no tattoos on his body. The tattoos signified that he had been taken over, but right now he couldn't see them on Falco's body, yet the way Falco was currently dealing with the oppositions was just as ruthless as the alter ego would be. Back in the ring after Falco had slammed their heads together, he landed on his feet and kicked both participants on their chests, sending them flying once again with caved-in chests and blood spilling out of their body parts. He didn't even mind that one of them was a girl. Zim had wanted to attack severally when Falco was dealing with them, but he decided to activate an advanced bloodline ability before he engaged Falco. Chapter 118. When Falco turned around, he noticed that Zim had grown 2 feet taller, bringing him to a height of 8 feet. Also, he was now as wide as 2 adult males joined together. White rocks had covered every part of his body from head to toe. Hardly any openings could be found on his body upon transforming into this new form. Zim bore no semblance to his former self in this state. He looked like an abominable monstrosity at the moment. "Do you still dare to call me weak after seeing this?" Zim asked while taking steps forward. "Bom, bom." His steps were like that of a titan. "Do you think covering up your weakness with a hard surface makes you any less weak?" Falco replied with a question of his own. We shall see who's weak and how you're going to successfully harm me," Zim said and raised his arm to shoot out pointy stones at Falco. Tua, 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 tua. Hundreds of pointy white stones shot out from his rocky hand towards Falco. Sway, sway, sway. Falco swerved from left to right and right to left across the place with a speed that was comparable to half of Angie's highest speed. Even with that, he was still able to dodge the projectiles accurately as he kept moving forward. Swoosh! All of a sudden, Falco's speed went up by a notch, and he dashed forward amid the rain of pointy stones. Zim was nowhere close to being as fast as Falco, but his eyes were able to follow his speed. He reacted by swinging out his left fist just as Falco arrived in front of him. His large rocky fist that was almost twice the size of Falco's entire face traveled towards him from above. Falco scrutinized the fist traveling towards his head at a slightly slower pace. He reacted by raising his left arm with speed. His left hand extended from underneath and pushed the large arm up, causing Zim to lose balance and stagger backward due to the sudden push, but before his foot could stomp on the ground after staggering backward, A palm tore through the air with speed and slammed into his chest. Boom! A loud blast resounded across the place as his palm slammed heavily onto Zim's rocky chest, pushing Zim back by a few feet. The effect this time couldn't be compared to the last time when he hadn't taken this form. It was weaker, which meant that his defense had increased. Falco had already confirmed this after blasting him backward with that strike. "Let's see how long your defense can keep up," Falco said internally as he raised his palms and dashed out again. Only he could see the whitish wavy like light surrounding his palms as he engaged Zim again. In a large technological environment, a 300-story tall building stood out majestic in another business area of the city. This building was shaped to look like armor, which was silver in color. It gave off a very exquisite feel. The security detail around the building was so tight that it could be mistaken for a military base. On the highest floor of the building, two people stood in front of each other. It was a man and a lady, both with cold looks. They weren't just on the highest floor, but actually on the rooftop of the building, which wasn't constructed in a way that people could stand on. The roofing was slanted, so it was very surprising that both of them could stand on it with ease. Tiny roads and buildings that looked like Lego toys were visible from this height. It was beautiful to see small mist gather around the rooftop of the building, and all this was due to hay. The atmosphere would have been at peace if not for the two people standing in front of one another, positioned in the middle of the large roof. The male was a man with dark brown hair and handsome cold looks, while the female was a young lady with ash-colored hair and a beautiful but extremely uncaring look. "What are you doing, young?" the lady asked with her glare intensifying. What am I doing?" "Well, obviously I'm here doing nothing right now thanks to you, Amy," young Joe said with a playful tone. "Stop acting a fool. You and I both know what I'm talking about. What is the purpose behind the dangerous mixture?" The lady, who happened to be Miss Amy, asked with a slightly disturbed look. "Ah, so the MBO has failed to find any meaningful information against me, and now they requested for you to come here and inquire. Pathetic," young Joe said with a light smile grazing his lips. It was unnatural how the coldness on a person's face could increase even when the person was smiling, yet young Joe looked just like that. "I'm not just here on behalf of them. This is an investigation that I've taken upon myself, and I'll warn you to better keep hiding and hide well, because once I get solid evidence that you're responsible for that, you will lose all your protection and I will finally be able to hurt you," Miss Amy said while staring into his eyes. "Haha, all right, good luck with that, but why are you interested in this case? Is it because of your student?" young Joe asked with a look of interest. He seems pretty interesting for a kid with an F-grade bloodline, bad parental upbringing, no friends, bullied repeatedly due to low bloodline grade. His whole life till this point has been nothing short of distasteful until he defeated my little brother and his small gang, those idiots. I'd say this is when his life started to get a little bit of color, then you came along and started training him. It is unknown how he became as strong as a higher-graded mixed blood. And he also went through a brain tweak session without suffering harm, yet he managed to fool a certain someone about being brain dead. If this kid is truly getting stronger, and you just happen to be training him, maybe you should be the one getting investigated instead, since you're breeding a monster. I'm sure you know it too that such a kid mindset must have been warped by the way he was treated in society. What happens when he becomes a very powerful figure in the future? Hee. Do you think such a kid will choose to be on the good side of the same humans that were on his bad side? Chapter 119. Miss Amy's face suddenly turned colder upon hearing young Joe's words. "We're done here," Miss Amy stated and turned around. She walked towards the edge of the rooftop on the right side and paused before turning around to stare at Young. "Just a little warning. Stay clear of him. The next time you touch him will be the last time you touch anyone," Miss Amy voiced out with a provocative look before jumping off the 300-story building. Shwai. Young Joe stared in the direction she had just jumped from with a playful grin on his face. "Now that I know you care about something, what stops me from using that against you?" he muttered with a cool tone. Back in the battle ring, Falco was currently dealing with Zim. Bam, 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 bam. The sound of collisions rang out as Falco's palm struck Zim's chest, shoulders, and face consecutively. Crack. Another crack appeared on Zim's face and chest area. Zim roared in pain and made spiky rocks grow out of his body. The spiky rocks also grew out of his fist as he threw it towards Falco. Falco swerved to the right and dodged the hand with ease. He bolted forward and leaped up while raising his knee. Bam! His right kneecap slammed into Zim's rocky jaw, causing a lot of rocks to blast apart as Zim was sent flying several feet backward with a look of pain evident on his face. Falco didn't give him the chance to catch his breath before sending out a fist after landing. This would be the first time Falco was going to punch Zim, so he made sure to pour a lot of strength into his right arm before throwing it forward. A whitish light covered his right arm as it traveled with intensity towards Zim's face. Bang! His punch landed cleanly on Zim's face, causing him to stagger backward even more with his rocky face crumbling. Falco dashed forward and arched his arm back once again before throwing it at Zim's stomach. Bang! 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 Numerous amount of punches rained down upon Zim. One punch after the other slammed into his body non-stop. More rock-breaking sounds rang out across the entire training ground. In a few minutes, Zim had been reduced to a pitiful state. Not only was he unable to land a single hit since the beginning, but his protective outer covering had also been completely destroyed, and now he was receiving those brutal punches on his bare body. Bang! 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 He received 3 furious punches from Falco again that caused him to vomit out another mouthful of blood. At this moment, his face was full of blood and most of his teeth were uprooted when he was receiving the barrages in his rocky form. Zim landed on the ground with a look of pain visible on his face. Right now he had expended his energy, so transforming into a rock again would be impossible, and even if he did, he knew Falco would just beat him back to his original form again. Falco walked towards the battered body of Zim, which was laying on the ground, and squatted before him. "Remember what we said about weaklings?" Falco asked before grabbing onto Zim's neck and lifting him. "What did we say about weaklings?" Falco asked while tightening his right hand on Zim's neck. "Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. Oh, sorry, was my grip too tight? Ah, you won't answer me? I guess I'll just continue then," Falco said before increasing the force of his grip on Zim's neck. Zim's eyes bulged as he winced in pain. He clawed, kicked, and punched repeatedly, but it was to no avail. After some seconds, Falco decided to relax the grip on Zim's neck and proceeded to release him. Plop! Zim fell to the ground while clutching his neck in pain. He kept coughing repeatedly. Due to this, he didn't notice that Falco had gone to pick up all the pointy stones around the battlefield that had fallen off his body. After picking up a lot of them, he held one in his right hand and raised it before throwing it out. Sway! A diamond-like stone flew through the air towards Zim and stabbed straight into his left chest. Ugh! Zim voiced out in pain as his body started bleeding again, but before he could touch it, more of these small pointy stones were thrown out. Swee-eye! Sway! 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 Falco threw out the stones in his hands with speed towards Zim. Poochie! Poochie! Different parts of his body were pierced by the stones thrown out. His chest, arms, legs, belly, face, thighs, etc. Falco only stopped after the 50 stones in his possession were exhausted. Not a single one of these stones missed. All of them were embedded in different parts of Zim's body. At this moment, Zim was looking like a porcupine. Falco didn't look like he was done. He walked over to Zim and grabbed him by the neck before lifting him once again. Zim was bleeding from almost every part of his body right now. Now the main event is about to start. You remember what you did to her next after this, right? Falco asked in a low tone. Zim shivered in pain and fright as he heard that. Falco proceeded to arch his right arm backward before sending it forward at full force. Bam! His palm slammed the pointy stone on Zim's chest and first. Erg! Zim shouted out in pain, but this was only the beginning for him. Falco repeatedly thrust out his arm back and forth, slapping more pointy rocks into Zim's body in the process. Zim was in so much pain that he didn't notice his neck was currently pierced in by Falco's finger. Requirement for bloodline acquisition has been met. Analyzing host compatibility with flesh-hardening bloodline 0% per 100%. Analysis complete. 89%/100%. Host compatibility with flesh-hardening bloodline is 89%. Does host desire to acquire this bloodline? Yes/no. Principal Airhill, what is the meaning of this? Is it necessary for your student to do this to mine instead of just throwing him out? Principal Dirk voiced out with a tone of annoyance, while pointing at the battlefield where Zim could be seen receiving numerous punches from Falco while being lifted in the air. What do you mean, Principal Dirk? The battlefield is not a place for mercy. Didn't you just say that a while ago? Principal Airhill said with a burst of light laughter. Chapter 120. What do you mean, Principal Dirk? The battlefield is not a place for mercy. Didn't you just say that a while ago? Principal Airhill said with a burst of light laughter. What happened to the morals you spoke of earlier? Are you not supposed to uphold them? Principal Dirk voiced out with anguish. Morals? That sounds richly hypocritical coming from you. On the battlefield, the enemies will show no such morals when killing your beloved students. Do these words sound familiar? Principal Airhill stated. Principal Airhill, how could such an upright person as yourself be fine with what is going on? Principal Dirk said with a frustrated tone. Principal Dirk's student needs to learn from this just as my student did. It is for his own good. Principal Airhill said with a righteous tone. Principal Dirk was about to retort again when other principals started speaking up. Principal Airhill is right. I wonder why Principal Dirk wants other students to learn but is adverse to his own student learning. Principal Dirk should stop throwing a tantrum. Your student can learn from this experience. The other principals agreed with Principal Airhill one after the other. Principal Dirk had no choice but to back down. He felt twice the frustration Principal Airhill felt earlier due to this and could only watch Zim get beaten up. Bam, 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 bam. The audience had lost count of the number of times Zim had received punches while being held up in the air. All the pointy stones had been embedded in his body completely, all 50 of them with average lengths of 5 inches and a maximum of 7 inches. No one could imagine the amount of pain he was going through, and even with that Falco still kept punching his belly and chest repeatedly. They thought Zim was ruthless when handling Angie, but now they knew his actions couldn't be seen as ruthless compared to that of Falco's. Congratulations! Host has acquired flesh-hardening bloodline. Falco, who was obviously Gustav in disguise, finally stopped hitting Zim after he saw the notification appear in his line of sight. This will be your punishment, Gustav said internally as he threw out his fist towards Zim's chest for the last time. Bang! Zim's chest caved and his back arched out as his body was blasted backward by over 70 feet before slamming onto the ground. He slid across the ground for a few more seconds before his body came to a stop. His sternum had cracked, his collarbones were shattered, his body was pierced in more than 50 different places, his forehead and face had wide holes where he was bleeding from. Gustav knew Zim wouldn't last long before dying after having his bloodline stolen, which was why he made sure that Zim's body crossed the line after receiving that punch. The medical team was able to gain access to his body fast enough and started giving him medical treatment immediately. Most of the audience had their mouths wide open after the battle came to an end. It couldn't even be called a battle, it was more of a one-sided beating. Zim's rocky state was durable enough to withstand bullets and powerful collisions from cars, so no one expected him to be easily beaten like that. Even Echelon Academy participants had to resort in using the force from the blasts of the landmine to throw him into the air before their captain, Andrew, kicked him out of the ring while in midair. They won due to strategy while not power, but in this battle, he lost completely in terms of power. There were still about 3 more participants in the battle ring who were in a good state. They could still fight if they wanted to, but they had been scared shitless when they saw the way Falco was beating Zim earlier. They were afraid that he would transfer his aggression towards them since it was pretty obvious that Zim was receiving such brutal beatings because of what he did to Angie. Gustav turned around to glare at the participants that were left. Immediately they saw the cold look. They flinched back once again, and ran out of the ring. Blackrock schools win. A loud announcement rang out after they all crossed the line. Cheer, cheer, cheer. Gustav walked out of the ring amidst the cheers of the crowd. Most of the students weren't pleased with Zim's actions earlier when he brutalized Angie, so they saw Falco's action as a heroic deed, especially students of Blackrock schools. Gustav walked towards the Blackrock school's seating area with elegance. His eyes scanned the area where Angie was being treated. Elle, Ariana, and Lim were surrounding her. They had looks of relief on their face, which made Gustav believe that Angie was going to be okay. Gustav didn't go to the seating area. He walked towards the path on the side that led out of the training field. This path also led to the restroom. He didn't bother answering the greetings of anyone, including the call of the coach. He didn't want to risk anyone knowing that he wasn't the original Falco, so he quickly headed for the restroom. Looks like his alter ego is still in control. Blackrock coach felt that this was the case since Falco didn't answer anyone's call or react to the crowd cheers. The normal Falco wouldn't do that, and this served as a perfect cover-up for Gustav. I will need Principal Airhill's help to bring Falco back. The coach started walking towards where the principals were seated. When Gustav arrived in the restroom, 3 notifications popped up in his line of sight. Hidden quest completed, hidden side quest completed, emergency quest completed. Angie finally opened her eyes an hour after the match had ended. She found herself lying on some kind of transparent stretcher around where Blackrock participants were seated. Gustav. This was the first word she mentioned upon waking up. Angie. The 3 girls beside her shouted out with joyful looks. Elle grabbed her right hand. Ariana grabbed her left hand while Lim caressed her face. Angie saw the faces of her friends and smiled. Her smile was so warm and beautiful that it made it look like she had forgotten about the incident that occurred with Zim. Are you okay? Chapter 121. Do you still feel hurt anywhere? Say the word and he'll have that bastard killed. The 3 girls voiced out at the same time, but Angie seemed to be looking around like she had lost something. Where's Gustav? She asked. The 3 girls' smile froze as they heard that. Gustav had disappeared over 30 minutes ago, and they hadn't seen him since then. Hello. Elle was about to say when a voice was heard from the side. I'm here. A cool masculine voice was heard from behind. The girls turned around and noticed Gustav walking towards them from the spectators area. Gustav arrived before Angie and asked, Are you okay? A sweeter and broader smile appeared on Angie's face as she reached out to grab Gustav's right hand. The 3 girls remembered when Gustav told them to leave the situation to him before disappearing for over 30 minutes. They had a feeling that he played an important role in what had happened with Zim and Falco. Maybe he helped in persuading Falco to join the battlefield. The girls had no idea that Falco was actually Gustav during that time, so they linked his disappearance to that. Thank you, Angie said to Gustav with shimmering eyes. Thanks for? Gustav asked with a confused expression. For taking me out of the battle ring. Angie replied. Taking you out? Gustav said in a confused manner. Even the girls were also dumbfounded. Angie, that was the doing of Falco, Elle stated. No. Angie said. That wasn't Falco. The girls stared at Angie with a look of confusion mixed in with bewilderment. A part of them wanted to believe this when they remembered the way Gustav left the other time assuring them that it was going to be okay, but when they remembered the rumors they heard about him being an F grade, they felt performing such a feat would be impossible. The whole situation seemed suspicious since Falco's alter ego wasn't as powerful as what was displayed on the battlefield and also never took over without tattoos appearing all over his body. Angie had also told them many times about how Gustav was strong enough to defeat mixed breeds and surpass her in speed, so right now they were confused about what to believe. Which abilities does Gustav bloodline grant him? This was a question no one knew the answer to, including Angie, since Gustav had never used bloodline abilities in anyone's presence. They turned to look at Gustav to listen to what he was going to reply with. The event ended for the day later on. Blackrock schools decided to sit out the finals even though they had the opportunity to battle Echelon Academy for the win. Due to this, Echelon Academy won first place while Blackrock schools were second, but they weren't bothered about it. Now that the event had ended, schools would be going back to their cities the next day. News had already circulated about how Zim was unable to use his bloodline abilities since the fight ended. Everyone laughed at him, thinking he had been beaten to the extent that he didn't remember how to activate his bloodline. They all felt it was a psychological situation, and he would probably be able to use it after he got over his fears, but they had no idea that he no longer has a bloodline. The real Falco was found passed out in the restroom. When he woke up, they asked him about the battle, but he was unable to recall anything about what happened. He claimed he wasn't responsible for the situation until video proofs were shown to him. This made the coach of BlackRock believe that Falco was truly taken over by his alter ego, which was why he couldn't remember a thing, but what bugged him was the absence of black tattoos all over his body, and why the alter ego didn't go on a rampage like it used to, because the alter ego didn't know friend from foe. Even though there were suspicions, no one knew that Gustav was responsible for the whole situation. Even if they suspected him, one would wonder how he would be able to defeat Falco, who had a powerful alter ego that would awake when he was in danger. Of course, when Angie and friends suspected Gustav, he denied having a hand in anything that happened earlier. They had no way of confirming that he was involved, neither was there any proof to justify Angie's claims. That night, Angie spent a lot of time with Gustav in the arcade alone. She had already been given the best medical treatment, so she was able to heal up before the day came to an end. They had a short conversation about what happened today, and Gustav warned Angie that if she carried on this way, she would suffer a worse fate in the future. He told her that if she was going to remain a nice person even on the battlefield, then becoming a fighter wasn't for her. This led to the conversation of what Angie truly wanted to do in the future. Her answer greatly surprised Gustav. "I want to join the MBO." "You what?" "I want to join the MBO. Do you remember I mentioned wanting to save people? I can only do that by joining the MBO. Angie, do you think this is a joke?" "A joke? What do you mean?" "You are too soft-hearted. Do you think you can kill enemies on the battlefield with kindness?" "But, what happened today is just the start. If you ever joined MBO in the future with this same attitude and mindset, you won't live long. You want to hit enemies kindness, but do you think they'll be merciful when returning your attack? Are you so naive as to believe the world out there will return the same kindness you've shown them? Do you really think enemies will treat you any better because you showed them kindness? Get a clue. You can't save anyone on the battlefield with kindness. Instead, you'll end up getting more people killed since you are not ruthless enough. So, what do I do?" Angie asked. Gustav paused for a few seconds and stared into Angie's eyes before answering. "You need to learn the difference between friend and foe. You need to learn how to not treat your foe like a friend." It was supposed to be a date, but Gustav used that night to drill these things into Angie. Angie listened to everything Gustav said with a crestfallen expression. She knew everything Gustav said was correct, but she couldn't bring herself to truly cause harm to another person unless it was a beast, but Gustav threatened her with something. "If you don't change, we will never be companions within the MBO camp. If you cannot learn how to be ruthless to your enemies, your companions will suffer the consequences." Chapter 122. Tell me, Angie, do you think anyone will want to be companions with a person that can cause their death? Gustav asked. Well, Angie stuttered repeatedly. There was no way anyone would want that, and she knew. If you cannot change, people will die, and you won't be able to save anyone in the end. Gustav went back to his room after his discussion with Angie. Although their discussion made the atmosphere turn a bit sore, Gustav didn't regret telling Angie all that. Right now, he was interested in checking the rewards he received from completing 3 quests at a time. Gustav sat on his bed and opened the notification bar in the system interface. Hidden quest completed. Information. Defeat a participant. Rewards. Plus 10,000 EXP. Plus 1 all stats. Palm strike level up. Hidden side quest completed. Information. Participate in the duel event. Rewards. Plus 10,000 EXP. Plus 10 extra attributes points. Dash level up. Emergency quest completed. Information. Save Angie. Rewards. Level up. New ability unlocked. God eyes. Gustav stared at the 3 rewards that came from completing the quests. He was satisfied with the rewards the system dished out. God eyes? Looks interesting. The reward that really caught his eye was the new ability that was unlocked. He decided to check out his skills and abilities in the system interface. Skills and abilities, dash, level 4, sprint, level 3, regeneration, level 3, shapeshifting, level 1, joint movement, level 3, toxin immunity, level 3, recreation, level 3, bloodline acquisition, level 3, slash, level 3, chop, level 7, palm strike, level 4, God eyes, level 1, God eyes, level 1, abilities, zoom eyesight, see clearly in dark places, and view a person life signs. Gustav was amazed seeing what the new ability could do. He could zoom his eyesight now with this, and also see in the dark. Although he could practically see in the dark without this ability when he was scanning everywhere with his perception, he still liked that this was a new ability. The only ability of God eyes that he didn't understand was the last one. Life signs? What are those? Signs of life? Even though it sounded simple, Gustav had a feeling that it wasn't. He had never heard anything about life signs before, so he was clueless as to what it was supposed to be. Gustav decided to try out the new ability since it did not require him to do anything absurd first. God eyes has been activated. Gustav's irises glowed a combination of scarlet and green upon activating God's eyes. Whoa! Gustav was amazed as an entirely new world appeared in his line of sight. The room had turned into a world of different colors that depicted different things. Inanimate objects around him were blue, and they all had different number readings placed on them. Some glowed brighter than others and had more numbers, while others were a bit dim compared to the rest with lesser numbers. His eyes traveled towards the balcony where some flowers were planted and used to decorate the place. In his line of sight, the plants were bright yellow in color. They could even be mistaken for gold. The plants also had numbers on them, and also some weird micro-symbols which Gustav couldn't understand. These micro-symbols weren't present on the walls and other inanimate things when he stared at them. At this time, there were more than 2 roommates here, so Gustav decided to check them out with God's eyes. He was once again astonished when he saw that 2 of his roommates had different colors from that of the plants and the inanimate objects. Their bodies were made of crimson, blue, and yellow glowing colors. Gustav could also see that these colors would occasionally brighten then get a little dimmer after that. Then he notices the micro-symbols that were present on the plants were also present on them. The difference was, it was only located on their foreheads. He still didn't understand what they meant. The one beside his bed had a degree on his forehead, while the one on the other side had a increment. Gustav kept staring at these symbols, trying to see if he could figure anything out about them. Mixed blood life sign degree has been successfully saved. Mixed blood life sign increment has been successfully saved. Gustav stared at the system notifications with a look of confusion mixed with intrigue. So those are life signs. Gustav now understood a bit, but this only brought him more questions. What are life signs and what are they used for? He wondered, but no matter how much he tried to, he couldn't come up with anything. He also tried using it as a skill and called out to it repeatedly just to figure out its purpose, but it was of no use. After trying and failing to figure out anything, Gustav decided to try how far his sight could travel. He stood up and walked over to the balcony. He stood before the balcony where a small pool of fishes could be seen within the glass that served as a rack to prevent people from falling off. Gustav looked down. The ground, which was more than 800 meters away, stared back at him. Gustav could see the people down there look like ants due to distance, but they seemed to also emit colors. He could see the combination of red and blue in some, while he could see red and yellow in others. Of course, he couldn't see them properly due to distance, so he decided to zoom his eyesight in and see how far it would take him. Gustav's sight traveled downwards, zooming in on everything located on the ground. The people walking on the ground that looked like ants in the distance slowly started becoming bigger and bigger. Gustav's eyes didn't stop zooming till it reached around 200 meters in length. He was able to calculate the zoom in length based on the number of floors his sight passed by while zooming in. Gustav recalled his zoomed sight with a look of astonishment. This could really come in handy, Gustav said internally. Chapter 123. Apart from seeing things in different colors, Gustav could zoom in on a particular place with the normal sight, which meant if he wanted to use the ability without seeing colors, he could decide not to. Gustav walked back to his bed with a smile. Looks like attending this event wasn't a waste, but I wonder why Miss Amy said this place is more dangerous than Plankton City. I never sensed or saw any form of danger, Gustav wondered as he lay down on his bed. I wonder what Miss Amy is up to right now. So this is why? A beautiful lady sporting gray hair stood in front of a glass barricade. This was a hidden underground facility, and the lady seemed to have broken in. People in white medical robes laid on the floor in different positions of the large room. They were taken out by this same lady. Within the barricaded glass walls was a large green rock. What is this energy it emits? Why does it feel familiar? She wondered while staring at it. It doesn't come from this world, that's why he wants to crack it open and use whatever is within for his selfish purposes, she muttered with a look of understanding. But what is this sense of familiarity I feel coming from it? The next morning the schools departed for their various cities. It had been a fun event, even though some unexpected things happened. Everyone that got new friends due to this event wished to one day meet up again. Echelon Academy and Blackrock schools had the same destination, so their buses would occasionally meet with one another during the road trip back to their city. Their road trip was supposed to be eventless, but something crazy happened. I don't want to keep dragging this arc, so we're skipping that scene. It will be told as a side story in the future. The students got back to their homes by nighttime. The first thing Gustav noticed when he got back to the neighborhood was the slightly somber atmosphere. When he and Angie were walking through the street, people were pointing at him and muttering words. Gustav was able to use perception to catch a bit of what they said, and his face turned dark upon hearing them. The first thing he did was visit Angie's father. It is just as you heard. A mixed breed attacked while you were away. What? How could that be? I killed one a day before I left here, and it hasn't been a week yet. The neighborhood believes you haven't been doing your work, and they've made a petition to skip your pay for this month. Oh, is that so? Yes, it would seem they believe you haven't earned it. No one knows about you killing a mixed breed a day before. If not for the good officer who just happened to be patrolling around at that time, there would have been casualties. The month hasn't ended yet, has it? There is still more than a week left, which means enough time to make you guys regret your decision. After saying this, Gustav stood up to leave, but Angie's father called for him to wait. Please, Gustav, don't do that. Angie's father already understood what Gustav's meant by his statement. He didn't want the neighborhood to suffer due to this misunderstanding. All you need to do is talk with the people of the neighborhood, Angie's father suggested. There was a small gathering where Gustav was able to converse with the people of the neighborhood. He's not doing his job. Imagine leaving us to danger for the past 3 days. He has never protected us since the start. He just keeps collecting payment for undone work. Yes, he never protected this neighborhood but receives payment. No, I believe he has done quite the job observing the neighborhood during the night time. Also don't forget that he saved this neighborhood even before he became an observer. Have you ever seen a single mixed breed attack the neighborhood again since he became the observer? Exactly my point, not a single mixed breed has attacked since then, which means he hasn't done anything. Yes, he's not doing his job if he hasn't killed a single mixed breed to protect our neighborhood. Most of the people in the neighborhood felt Gustav hadn't done anything since he became an observer, while others felt this wasn't the case. From the start, Gustav didn't say anything till Angie's father gave him the signal. Gustav just walked to the front of the gathering while holding on to his storage device. Zing, 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 zing. Decapitated heads of different mixed breeds appeared on the ground in front of the gathering. Bloodwolf, Savarania serpent, mutated ape, etc. Gasp. The entire gathering was in shock. They immediately recognized these creatures. Those who were speaking earlier about Gustav not protecting the neighborhood kept their mouths shut upon seeing these heads. Angie's father walked to their fronts to speak. I think this already says a lot about what happens during the nights when you all are sleeping soundly. From behind, Angie had a look of surprise also. Doesn't this mean he has been dealing with them himself? She recalled that they had never run into any mixed breeds during their night patrol together. She never knew that Gustav had been killing them himself. The meeting ended with the neighbors apologizing to Gustav for their conduct. Gustav went back to his apartment afterward to plan his next steps. He had missed his apartment during the last 3 days, even though he hadn't been here for long. Another mixed breed attacked the neighborhood, eh? Gustav couldn't help but think that something was wrong somewhere. The attack from mixed breeds usually came once or twice a month before he started living here. Then it increased to once a week, and now it seemed like it would be coming twice a week from now on. Gustav wondered what will become of the neighborhood when he left here. Will they be able to hire another mixed blood? I have to find a way to get through the border and investigate how the mixed breeds keep crossing it. Gustav came to a decision. For the next few days, Gustav trained his gravitational energy container bloodline and focused on channeling his bloodlines to their next points. The system was currently upgrading itself with the energy he absorbed from the astrobic tank. Upgrading system 34/100%. Since the system started upgrading, he hadn't been able to access it. No quests were issued, including the daily tasks. Even though there were no daily tasks in the last few days, Gustav still did the exercises because he was used to them. He had learned a new skill with his gravitational energy container, and he was ready to try it out where the border was located. At night, he was going to patrol the neighborhood alone, and that would be the perfect opportunity for him to try it out. Nighttime came and Gustav left his apartment for the border. In a few minutes, he had arrived there. He stood in front of the green and blue wall made of lines that extended upwards with a look of astonishment. The amount of energy he could sense coming from those lines was overwhelming. He could tell that his body would be turned to ashes if he made contact with those lines, which had him wondering how the mixed breeds were able to escape from there, since they were weaker than he was. Gustav activated his gravitational energy container bloodline. Although the system wasn't available to use at the moment, he could still use his bloodlines manually. It was harder, but he had gotten the hang of it in the past few days. Energy container. Gravity circulation. Gustav placed his right and left index fingers together before using them to draw invisible circles in the air. He moved across the place and did this several times before clapping his hands together. Pa! Immediately he did that. More than 100 milky glowing circles appeared in front of the border. Truant. The lines from a small part of the border below was being sucked into these circles. All the circles focused on absorbing power from that particular point. The circles begin to get filled up with some red-colored energy. After a few minutes, a small opening could be seen forming in front of Gustav. The energy from that part of the border was being absorbed at a rapid pace, causing the opening to expand even more as seconds passed. Swoosh! Gustav immediately dashed through the opening just as it became big enough for him to fit through. The circles outside were already filled to the brim with energy, so they couldn't suck any more energy. A few seconds after passing through the border, the opening closed up. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.